capital of the world.
To participate in the general public comment period, please call now at 818-238-3335. For any scheduled public hearings, please call when prompted to speak if you want the comment to be part of the record. Members of the public may speak for up to 3 minutes depending on the number of speakers.
Good evening and welcome to a regular meeting of the Burbank City Council on Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. To help slow the spread of COVID-19, City Council adopted an emergency proclamation on Tuesday, July 19th, requiring face coverings to be worn while in attendance at all City of Burbank public meetings, including but not limited to meetings of the City Council and its boards and commissions. We appreciate all attendees joining us in person for wearing a face covering while they are inside the council chamber. I would like to invite Community Assistance Coordinator Bob Kramer to lead us in the invocation this evening. Will everyone please stand and remain standing for the flag salute?
Thank you.
Welcome.
Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. And we thank you for our city, and we thank you for our citizens. We pray you will continue to bless our city and to protect the children of the city. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam City Clerk, please conduct the roll.
Thank you. Councilmember Frutos.
God, I'm so happy to be here today.
Hello. Councilmember Schultz.
Present.
Councilmember Springer.
Here.
Vice Mayor Anthony. And Mayor Talamantes.
Present.
Noting the absence of Vice Mayor Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you. We would like to advise the community that there will be one period of public comment tonight. Members of the public may comment in person or by telephone during the general public comment period on any matter concerning city business and or any agenda item. If you would like to participate in general public comment over the phone, please call now at 818-238-3335. Callers will be placed in a queue until all in-person comments have been received. Tonight, Council will be adjourning in memory of former Los Angeles Dodgers sportscaster Vincent Edward Scully, a local legend who passed away on August 2nd, 2022 at the age of 94. Vincent Edward Scully, most commonly known as Vin Scully, was born in New York on November 29, 1927, at the young age of 22. Vin began broadcasting with the Brooklyn Dodgers, and just 3 years later, he became the youngest person ever to broadcast a World Series game. That start led to a 67-year partnership with what became the Los Angeles Dodgers until Vin's retirement in 2016. Vin's love of baseball was evident in his enthusiastic way of bringing each moment of the game to life for listeners. He was an icon in the world of sports broadcasting, known for his genuine enthusiasm and passion for baseball, with his voice being considered part of the soundtrack of summer in LA. We will miss hearing his signature opening. It's time for Dodger baseball. Vin Scully was a true legend. He will be remembered for his love for the game of baseball. respect for his fans, and his commitment to his faith and family. On behalf of the City Council and the entire Burbank community, our thoughts and prayers go out to all who were touched by the life of Vin Scully. In honor of Vin Scully, City Hall and the Burbank Water and Power Ron Davis Administration Building will be lit in blue this evening. And as an aside, I was fortunate, I was honored 6 years ago to sign the Vin Scully Day in Burbank proclamation. That was September 23rd, 2016. I was honored to be mayor then, and now I'm honored to be mayor tonight as well. So we'll adjourn in his memory. Thank you, everybody. We have 4 announcements this evening. Yeah, we're waiting for the recording.
Proof or medical religious exemption will be required of all applicants. Protect yourself and your loved ones from the high cost of emergency.
Yeah, we started.
Following our announcements for August 9th, 2022. The November 8th, 2022 City of Burbank General Municipal Election nomination period opened on Monday, July 18th at 8 a.m. and closes on Friday, August 12th at 5 p.m. The nomination period will see candidates to fill 3 offices for member of the City Council, 1 office of the City Clerk, and 1 office of the City Treasurer for a full 4-year term ending on December 14th, 2026. The requirements for candidates for elective offices of the city are as follows: a United States citizen, at least 18 years of age, a resident of the City of Burbank for at least 29 days prior to filing nomination papers, and a registered voter in the City of Burbank at the time of nomination. Qualified individuals may contact the Burbank City Clerk's office at 818-238-5851 during normal office hours, Monday through Friday, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. If an incumbent does not file by the deadline, the nomination period will be extended until Wednesday, August 17th, 2022 at 5 p.m. for candidates other than an incumbent for that seat only. The Burbank City Clerk's Office is accepting applications for 1 vacancy on the Burbank Water and Power Board for an unexpired term ending July 31st, 2026. The deadline to submit an application is Wednesday, September 7th at 5 p.m. If interested, apply online at burbankca.gov/BCC application. Vaccination proof or medical religious exemption will be required of all applicants. For more information, please contact the Burbank City Clerk's office at 818-238-5851 or email cityclerks@burbankca.gov. The Burbank City Clerk's office is accepting applications for 1 vacancy on the Police Commission for an unexpired term ending July 31st, 2025. The deadline to submit an application is Thursday, August 18th at 5 p.m. If interested, apply online at burbankca.gov/BCC application. Vaccination proof or medical religious exemption will be required of all applicants. For more information, please contact the Burbank City Clerk's office at 818-238-5851 or email cityclerks@burbankca.gov. Protect yourself and your loved ones from the high cost of emergency medical care by participating in the Emergency Medical Services Program. The program is offered by the Burbank Fire Department and covers any deductible or co-payment for emergency medical care and ambulance transportation. The $5 monthly payment can be added to a Burbank water and power bill, or the $60 annual fee can be paid in full at time of registration. For more information, please visit www.burbankfire.us. This concludes the announcements for this evening.
Assistant City Manager Judy Wilkie, do you have anything to report?
Thank you, Mayor Talamantes. Yes. Our Burbank Water and Power General Manager, Don Roth-Lindell, is going to come up and give us an update on the watering restrictions that we're all going to be feeling in September as a result of the Metropolitan Water District pipeline fix. Thank you, Don.
Welcome.
Thank you,
Welcome,
Ms.
Don.
Wilkie. Hello, Honorable Mayor Talamantes and City Council members. So, tonight, thank you. There we go. I wanted to remind everyone that we are on stage 2 watering restrictions currently, which means we can water 2 days a week, only on Tuesdays and Saturdays. And we need to water before 9 a.m. or after 6 p.m. At this stage, attended hand watering is allowed any day before 9 a.m. and after 6. Low flow irrigation is allowed on designated watering days, and with low flow irrigation during the watering days, we're exempt from the 15-minute per zone rule that timed watering would follow. No outdoor evaporative cooling devices such as misters are permitted, and pools, when not in use, must be covered to prevent or decrease water evaporation. But upcoming, we have, let's see, I think I'm not aiming at the right thing. Thank you. Appreciate your help. We have an event, and that event is from September 6th through the 20th, where we will not be allowing outdoor watering, with the exception of hand watering for trees and gardens on any day before 9 a.m. or after 6 p.m. The reason for this, and let's go on to the next slide, is that we have an issue, or I shouldn't say we, Metropolitan Water District has an issue with the pipe that brings water in from the Colorado River. And during this pipe sprung a leak back in April. A temporary fix was put into place, and that fix is not holding. So we need to do a rapid leak repair. Metropolitan Water District needs to do a rapid leak repair, and we'll be doing that repair from September 6th through the 20th. Prior to that repair, they are staging materials and getting everything ready so that the time down can be as short as possible. They will come during the time that they are doing that repair. We will only be able to receive water from our second source, and that is the State Water Project. So on this little diagram, we've got a picture of the Colorado River going through the Grand Canyon, and that's where the leak is. And then we've got another picture showing water coming in from the State Water Project. We are currently not taking water from the State Water Project because water levels there are so low. There are 6 communities in Metropolitan Water District that are fully dependent on state water. Those communities are already at 1 day a week watering. All of us will need to be pulling water from the State Water Project, all 26 communities, during this time period. So that is why we have to limit watering to virtually nothing, to just hand watering before 9 a.m. and after 6 p.m. During this time, so that we preserve our precious liquid gold. Any questions for me?
Councilmember Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for the report, by the way.
Certainly.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Lindell, excellent presentation. I just had one question. As I recall, I believe in about 2015 or 2016, BWP had a recycled water program that residents could take advantage of. Is that something that the utility is looking at minimum for this 2-week period?
Oh, thank you for the question, Councilmember Schultz. Yes, there was a program called H2O to Go where people could pick up recycled water. The program had quite a bit of difficulty when it was in place. However, we are looking into putting in a 2-week pilot for these 2 weeks to see if we can make that work again. And so that would enable citizens to come and pick up water, recycled water, in which there aren't limitations that they could then use on their lawn. We do encourage people also during this time to collect water in cisterns. We have rebates for those to collect water in the shower, in buckets that they, the water that would normally be going down the drain that people can use to water their lawn, et cetera, or, the water when you're waiting for your water to heat up, the heated water to come out of the faucet, capture that and use that as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
I've got a question in regards to enforcement. What if your neighbors aren't following the rules and regulations or your mandates? What happens? What kind of enforcement are we going to have?
Thank you for that question as well. So we are currently under enforcement. And so for people who are not watering just on the watering days, just on Tuesdays and Saturdays, those customers, we have 2 ways of finding that out. One is if other customers tell us about that, in which case we can follow up. And then we also can look at our data. And where we've got active data that shows daily usage, it's easy to see when people are watering. So we are sending out letters. Customers get an education letter, and then they get a second, more strongly worded education letter. And the third letter will also have a fine attached. That first fine will be $100. The letter after that will be $200, and the letter after that will be $500.
So are we going to, what if a neighbor calls you and tells you that my neighbor was watering on Wednesdays and Fridays? Do you have to actually visibly visualize it yourselves? Or can you just go by the neighbor telling you what's happening?
We would check the data and see if
So
the
we're
data.
basing it on data.
Yeah, and see if the data would back up that concern.
Okay. Councilmember Springer?
Thank you very much for your presentation. On one of the slides, I think it said that we would be 100% reliable on the state water project, but not really, right? Because we can't take any water out of it because there are 6 cities that they only get water from there. So will we take water from the state water project or will we take it from storage?
Oh, thank you. Excellent question. We will be taking water from the state water project. So for this 2-week period, those 6 cities will be sharing it with all of the rest of the cities. So all of us, including those 6 cities, will go to 0 watering days in order to maximize the use of that water. We do have about 4 days of full use storage in our system. However, if for some reason we couldn't get any water, we would go to emergency water use, and then with emergency water use, we have about 13 days of full storage. As long as we are receiving some water, we can blend that water with the water that we've stored in the ground, in which case we have about 2 years of storage. But we are required to blend the groundwater. So as long as we are getting some water, we have a lot of storage.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Certainly.
For this emergency that we're obviously coming up to in September, what about the gallon a bucket recycled water for LA City? We get a gallon bucket of fresh portable drinking water. How is that going to play into this?
We'll all be, it will still play in. It was just that we will all be using state water for our gallon of water. So there's just not a lot of it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure,
Yes,
thank you
go
for the
ahead,
question.
One more question.
Yeah.
So what impact will this have on the state water project and the dams up there? Taking water from there and not from the Colorado River?
Yes, it just puts a little bit more strain on the state water project. And so as soon as these repairs are complete, we will go back off state water project water and right back onto Colorado water. Today, because of the leak, the capacity in that line, and the line from the Colorado River is diminished. So normally it would be 750 cubic feet per second, and they are only putting in 525 cubic feet per second right now. So we do need to get that repaired so that Colorado River water can be back up at full capacity.
Okay, thank you.
So the ask for September 6th through the 20th is for our residents not to use their sprinkler systems for that period of time.
Or
They-
sprinklers connected to hoses.
No sprinklers, period.
Any unattended watering is.
So you can
is
still do it
verboten.
by hand. And that's just the trees and immediate plants.
Yes, just trees and gardens. Limit the watering as much as possible before 9 a.m. and after 6 p.m.
Okay?
Keep the trees alive, though. We do want to save the trees.
Yes, definitely. All right, thank you. Thank you for the report and the update. I'm sure our residents will adhere to those requirements. They have been very receptive in the past, so. And just to talk about the recycled water, yeah, it was something that I brought up to council back then, 6, 7 years ago. Because I saw it when I was in Palm Springs, and they were using it out for the farms. And I'm thinking, why can't we use that? We have a lot of recycled water in Burbank. So I brought back, we had a discussion, and it happened. I didn't hear about the problems that you're mentioning, but it seemed to me it was working fine. Anyway, thank you very much for that. We have 2 presentations on the agenda this evening. The first presentation is general update for the Greater Los Angeles County Vector Control District. I invite Dr. Wassam, representative of Burbank in the Greater Los Angeles County Vector Control District Board of Trustees. Welcome, Dr. Wassam.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. It's been 15 years that I've been on trustee with the board, and I'm continually impressed with the public health work that the district does. And tonight, we're going to have 2 department managers here, Steve Vitrone with the Scientific Technical Services, and Mary Jo Coburn will give most of the presentation. She's the Director of Community Affairs. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening. Okay. All right. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for having me here. I was here last year, actually, and gave a more comprehensive presentation about vector control. And Dr. Wassam has been doing an amazing job giving you updates. Sounds like at his last presentation, there were some questions regarding a new technique that we are looking into. So I'm here to talk a little bit more about that. But I'm also going to give a brief overview about the other things that we have talked about in case there are members of the public who are tuning in for the first time. So if we can go to the next slide. So just a brief overview. Vector control works on an integrated vector management program that consists of disease surveillance, mosquito management, and education and outreach. Next slide. So this map right here shows you the work that has been done in the city of Burbank in the past 2 years. We've had nearly 2,000 residential and public inspections, 811 abandoned or unmaintained swimming pools, and a little over 1,000 inspections for underground storm drains. So that's a lot of work, and this is a really good map that showcases all the different places that we have been to, and we'll continue to keep you updated on the work and the service that's been done in the city. Next slide. Why care about mosquitoes? Or mosquitoes are the deadliest animal in the world. There are over 700,000 fatalities each year from mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are capable of transmitting diseases like West Nile virus, Zika, dengue, and it only takes one disease to cause an outbreak. So that is something that we are carefully watching and making sure to prevent. Next slide. For the mosquito life cycle, it's important to note that only the female mosquitoes bite. They need the blood meal for protein to lay their eggs, and the whole life cycle for mosquitoes take about 5 to 7 days in standing water. Next slide. So there are 2 mosquitoes that we are very concerned about in Southern California, and they are present in the city of Burbank. The first one is a brown mosquito that we call the Culex mosquito. They've been around and they've been transmitting West Nile virus since 2003. In LA. The other mosquito that we are concerned about is fairly new, although it's been here for a few years now. It is invasive Aedes mosquitoes. These mosquitoes are capable of transmitting other diseases like chikungunya, Zika, dengue, yellow fever. Next slide. And you can click. Okay, so this is another diagram of what is going on in Southern California, and it's broken down into what's going on in California, in our jurisdiction, as well as the city of Burbank. So you can see the different progressions through the year. Some years there are a lot of activities, some years there have not been. Particularly in the city of Burbank, we had 9 positive mosquito samples found in 2020, whereas in 2021 and currently, we have had 0. So that's important to note, though, because we don't want the residents to have this false sense of safety or security that there's no West Nile virus in Burbank, so we're good. As you can see in the map, there's a lot of activities in nearby cities and communities, and we know that if we live in Burbank or we work in Burbank, we have families in other communities and other cities, and we could be exposed. So we just want people to know that there's still a lot of activities, and West Nile virus is endemic. It happens every year. We see activities every year, not necessarily in Burbank, but in nearby communities. Next slide. Okay, so the other one that I do want to talk about is the invasive Aedes mosquitoes. So as I mentioned, they are a threat to Angelenos because they can transmit Zika, dengue, yellow fever. The good news is that we have not found any local transmission of these diseases locally. However, the risk is if someone travels overseas in an area where there is an active transmission, they come back because they're bitten, they are viremic, the local mosquitoes that are now here could bite them. And if those mosquitoes bite other people, we could have an outbreak. And that's what we're trying to prevent. Next slide. So before we start talking about the actual method of control, let's first address what the new challenges are in controlling the invasive Aedes mosquitoes. These mosquitoes have been around since 2011 in our jurisdiction. They are aggressive daytime biters. We've had a lot of residents tell us, I haven't been bitten before, but now I'm experiencing them and I'm getting bitten during the day. These mosquitoes prefer to breed in smaller sources, such as flower pot saucers, yard drains, and water-holding plants. Plants like bromeliad or agave that can't have like these leaf axils, they can hold water. And people normally don't think like that. They think just containers, so they get rid of that. But there are breeding in plants themselves. These mosquitoes' ability to lay eggs in multiple and small sources make them difficult to control. One big challenge for vector control is gaining access to the small sources that are in people's properties. There are over 1 million properties in our jurisdiction. We can't get into all of them. So with this next slide, okay. So you can see in the diagram there, the blue dots on the right, it started in South El Monte, and progressively through the years, it started to go throughout the jurisdiction, and now it's all over Greater LA. With the spread of invasive Aedes in LA County, residents' quality of life has changed in how they enjoy the outdoors. In many cases, residents experience multiple bites in a short period of time while in their backyards or outside. This is due to these mosquitoes being aggressive biters, and they prefer to feed on people. The other mosquitoes prefer to feed on birds, but these mosquitoes prefer to feed on people. Next slide. With the impact of invasive Aedes on residents and the diseases they can carry, the district is looking at newer technology on how to control these mosquitoes. SIT, or sterile insect technique, is one method of control. SIT is a non-chemical control method that uses sterilization, sterilizing the males to help control the mosquito populations. How does it work? A system is used to sterilize the male mosquitoes in a lab. The mosquitoes are then released to a specific area over a period of time, and when these sterilized males mate with the female mosquitoes, the eggs or the offspring do not survive in adulthood, reducing the mosquito population. It's important to note that the SIT is specific to controlling one species of mosquitoes. The mosquito that we are concerned about are the Aedes aegypti mosquito. So now I'm going to talk about the 3 techniques that are currently available and what we are reviewing. So the first one, next slide please, is called Wolbachia. So Wolbachia uses a bacteria that is injected into the mosquito eggs. The mosquitoes are then sorted and the male mosquitoes are raised into adults. The male mosquitoes are released into a specific area to mate with the females, and because of the bacteria, the offspring eggs will not develop. So Wolbachia is a naturally occurring bacteria in other insects, such as bees and butterflies, and cannot be spread from mosquitoes to other insects. So that's one technique. The next one. The next one is irradiation. And irradiation uses X-rays or gamma rays to irradiate male mosquitoes. The males are then released and they mate with the female mosquitoes. The eggs that the female lays are infertile and will not hatch. So that is another technique. And the last technique is the genetically modified mosquitoes. And these mosquitoes have had a gene modified to prevent their offspring. In one case, a self-limiting gene is implanted into the male mosquitoes. When those males mate with females, they pass the gene on to their offspring. Then the offspring die before they reach adulthood. Next slide. So it's important to note that only female mosquitoes bite, as I've mentioned. So what's being released in these techniques are the male mosquitoes that do not bite. They do not spread diseases. But they have been sterilized so that when they mate with the female mosquitoes, they do not produce offspring. And they cannot transmit diseases. SIT will also not eliminate the use of other chemicals to control mosquitoes because it only controls one species of mosquitoes. So the other control measures will continue to reduce other mosquito populations. SIT is an ongoing process, and the releases would need to occur throughout the mosquito season and every year. According to the US EPA, there is no adverse effect on human and wildlife when releasing sterilized mosquitoes. There are no risks to people, animals, or the environment. At this time, the district is reviewing all of these 3 techniques. We're still in the early stages, and no decision has been made on whether to use SIT, what technique, or when or where it will be used. But I think it gives residents the hope that there is hopefully a solution or a help to what they are experiencing currently. Next slide. Another question that we typically get is, can mosquitoes transmit COVID-19? No information at this time or evidence suggests that COVID-19 is transmitted by mosquitoes. Every summer, because of the activities of mosquitoes, we have a PSA that we show, and this is our 30-second PSA that I would like to share right now.
Is this you during mosquito season?
Mom, mosquitoes!
Are mosquitoes biting you all day and night? Mosquito Watch is here to help end the bites. End the bites in your home, in your garden, and while you sleep. End the bites. Learn more at mosquitowatch.org.
Thank you. Okay, so that is available if you have movie in the park event, or hopefully you can use that on your website or share with your residents. What can residents do to protect themselves from mosquitoes? There are a number of ways. One is to empty, scrub, turn over, cover, or throw out any items that hold water. Tip out any standing water indoors and outdoors. As I've mentioned, mosquitoes need about 5 to 7 days to complete their life cycle, so we need to eliminate the mosquitoes. Or if they need to have a bin that holds toys or something, we normally find that in people's homes. Drill a hole at the bottom of the container so that the water drains. I have gone into inspections and I have seen these tubs filled with toys, so the kids would reach in there, but it's also filled with water, and they could be breeding mosquitoes. Next slide. So we do have, you just click a couple more times, thank you. We do have a do-it-yourself solutions page. Sorry, go back. There you go. They can download at tiptostakeaction.org, and we have compiled a list of all the common breeding sources around the home, and it's separated into, the kitchen, the backyard, the bathroom, and the recommendations and how the residents can eliminate or remove the standing water or breeding on their property. So please download that. If they can't figure it out, they can always call us as well. Next slide.
Could you repeat that website you mentioned?
tiptostakeaction.org.
Okay.
Tiptostakeaction. Thank you.
That's a tongue twister.
And then the other thing is they can also protect themselves by wearing repellent. Use EPA or CDC approved repellent that contains these ingredients: D-picaridin, IR 3535, or oil of lemon eucalyptus. It's just really important for residents to read the instructions or directions to see how often they need to reapply. Some of them can last, 8 hours. Some need to be reapplied every 20 minutes or so. Next slide. Oops, next one. So that is what it looks like on the actual repellent itself, so they can look at it. Next slide. I am often also asked, when is mosquito season? Living in beautiful Southern California, it's warm pretty much all year, so there are mosquito activities pretty much all year, but the height of mosquito season is usually in late May into late October, but of course that changes sometimes. We have seen activities into November or December. So we continue to keep the community alert. We post on Nextdoor, on social media. We also send out press releases, and we're continually communicating with the city staff to let them know if there is a threat, immediate threat in the city. Next slide. So just to highlight, I did cover a lot. Remove standing water, tip out containers, wear insect repellent, and share the information with their friends and neighbors. Go to tiptostakeaction.org for more information. Next slide. And this is our agency contact. If they have any service requests, they can download the information or follow us on social media for any updates. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And once again, our Director of Scientific Technical Services is also here to help answer other questions.
Thank you for your presentation. It's very informative. Anytime you give it, we talk about mosquitoes. We have to. Colleagues, any questions, comments? Councilman Frutos?
This year, I don't know if it's just me, but I think there's a less amount of ankle biters this year compared to last year. Is it just me, or is there a big rash of ankle biters in our city?
I mean, we know that they are present. It could be that you and your neighbors are eliminating standing water, and so, there is a reduction in your area. We do know that August, September is also the height of a lot of the activities, so we could just be entering it right now, and we're not quite there yet. Let's hope it's the first one.
Okay, ixnay that comment. Ixnay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Real quick, are ankle biters a different type of mosquito?
The ankle biters are the invasive Aedes mosquito, the black and white mosquito. We call them ankle biters because they tend to bite in the lower extremities, which actually exposes our pets. So that was a really good question. Thanks for bringing that up. These mosquitoes are also capable of transmitting canine heartworm to our pets. So they tend to be in the lower extremities because they're very smart. They know that if they fly up here, we can easily kill them. So they fly down there.
Do they hang out in the grass? Do you know? I mean,
Sometimes they do, but they go into the hedges sometimes. That's their resting place, and they come out when they're hungry, especially the female mosquitoes. So they go where the humans or pets are.
Perfect. Councilmember Springer?
Yes, thank you very much for your informative presentation. Is there a nickname for the Aedes mosquito? I have a friend who calls mosquitoes tiger mosquitoes, and I'm just curious.
Yeah, so there are different species of the invasive Aedes mosquitoes. So there is the Asian tiger mosquito, and then there's also the West Nile virus, the invasive Aedes mosquito. The black and white mosquito is the same. Those are all the invasive Aedes mosquitoes. They're black and white, and they also call them zebra mosquitoes because they're black and white, or ankle biters. So they have multiple nicknames.
Okay, thank you.
I've got another question in regards to your third slide. You mentioned services provided to Burbank residents, 2020 through 2022 so far.
Yes.
There's 1,900 services. Is
Yes, so we have this new software, and that's how far back it goes. If you are interested in the other services past that, we can provide those for you. But our GIS person, when I asked for, recent services provided for the city, this is what she was able to pull up.
So is that the resident calling you to come and check?
This
or-
is a compilation of everything. So residential and public inspections, swimming pools, underground storm drains. It's really hard to see, but there is, a legend on the left about what colors represent what service is provided.
My question was swimming pools, 811 swimming pools in the city of Burbank?
Yeah, so that's actually, that's a total number of swimming pools that have been unmaintained. So we have a really good swimming pool program. So this is a list of all the pools that we've compiled. The good thing is we do alert the residents, hey, summertime is coming up. There's going to be mosquitoes around. Please maintain your swimming pool. And they have to take a photo of the current status of their swimming pool along with the alert that we send them. And once they send that to us and we can see that either the swimming pool has been filled or it's been fixed, then we remove them from our list.
So what triggers an alert?
So there are different things. Sometimes we do a flyover in some areas in which a plane does, we don't look at anything else in the backyard aside from the swimming pool to see if it's green. If it's green, then it's marked that it's a potential public health issue. Sure. We've also had neighbors call us saying, they can report anonymously and say, hey, there's a green pool in our neighborhood, this could be an issue. Or it could be a vacated home, and it could be the real estate or the bank that calls us and say, hey, this swimming pool has been unmaintained, it's been abandoned or vacated for some time, can you please look to see if, we can remedy the issue.
How long would it take for an inspector to come out and look at it?
Our inspectors are very quick, especially because this is a public health issue. As soon as we get a notification, they normally get it, and they normally go within 24 to 72 hours. Usually at the 24, really quick, but sometimes it depends on what the volume of calls that they already have on their queue.
Well, thank you. Any other questions, council members? Thank you very much.
All right.
Dr. Wassam, thank you for coming, and thank you, staff, for joining you as well. Thank you for the
Thank you
presentation.
so much.
Thank you. See, we're all becoming experts on mosquitoes, ankle biters. The second presentation is an update from the Valley Economic Alliance regarding collaborations with the city of Burbank and resources for economic development. I welcome Ms. Sonia K. Blake. Welcome, Ms. Blake, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Valley Economic Alliance. Welcome, Ms. Blake. Oh, and Mary.
Good afternoon, actually good evening, Council, Mayor Talamantes and Council members. Mary Hamzoyan, Economic Development Manager for the City of Burbank. I'm actually going to do the honors of introducing Ms. Blake to you before she begins her presentation. So I would like to, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Sonia Blake, President and CEO of the Valley Economic Alliance, who will be providing an update to you tonight regarding the accomplishments of the Alliance and the ongoing collaboration with the Economic Development team. I've had the pleasure of working with Ms. Blake since she joined the Alliance in 2020, and she has been a leading catalyst in facilitating economic development in the San Fernando Valley, promoting business vitality, efficient mobility, workforce development, affordable housing, and other aspects of establishing and maintaining livable, sustainable, and equitable communities. Some of the Alliance's accomplishments include successfully advocating for the establishment of the San Fernando Valley as a geographic region for the U.S. Census Tracts, assisting more than 44,000 Valley businesses to remain and expand, saving and creating almost 125,000 jobs, recruiting, training, and placing over 10,000 adults to meet business needs. Prior to her leadership of the Alliance, Ms. Blake served as the director of the Community Business in Los Angeles, Mayor Eric Garcetti's Office of Economic Development. Welcome, Ms. Blake.
Welcome to Burbank.
Thank you very much, Mary and Mayor Talamantes and City Council. So glad to be here, and thank you so much for allowing us to come and present to you some of the partnerships that we have been enjoying. Would you like to give me a clicker? Okay, certainly. Also would like to really acknowledge City of Burbank staff and the public for their attentiveness to the presentation. So the Valley Economic Alliance, we have been very much at work and super excited about the work that we've been able to do with City of Burbank as one of our partners. Next slide, please. Some of the activities that we have undertaken as part of advancing our mission to engage and unite Valley stakeholders and raise the standard of living in our communities. We have about 160,000 businesses, 2 million residents that we are serving within a 350 square mile area. And Burbank is one of the distinguished 5 cities that the Alliance is proud to partner with. What we do is we promote business retention, job creation, workforce development, as well as tourism attraction, among other strategies to help bolster our local economy. Next slide, please. And we enjoy fantastic leadership, strong leadership from Burbank leaders, and we're very thankful to have Burbank Vice Mayor Constantine Anthony on our board of directors, as well as Council Member Nick Schultz. Thank you so much for your leadership. And Frank Miller, who runs the Burbank-Glendale-Pasadena Airport, as well as we have a full board of 83 members. However, these Burbank leaders are well represented on our board of directors as part of our governance, our accountability, our leadership, and we are very thankful for your vision and your support. Next slide. In addition to the leadership of our board of directors, we enjoy a very strong and fruitful relationship with Burbank's economic development leadership. And we are actively engaged in several initiatives, including having a Burbank representative as an active member of our Economic Development Committee, as well as a founding member of our Regional Cities Economic Development Teams Roundtable. So all 5 of our city economic development teams come together and talk about how we can collaborate as a region, and the Alliance is at the center of convening and facilitating those meetings. Next slide, please. One of our major emphases, especially during the past couple years, has been our business assistance program. As you well know, the pandemic has had a devastating impact on many of our small businesses, our local small businesses. And so the Alliance moved into swift action in partnership with City of Burbank to help companies increase their revenues through various educational programs such as digital marketing, procurement and contracting. How can companies help bolster their revenues during this economic downturn? Secondly, how can we help them decrease their expenses? So we've connected them with various utilities, rebates, and other cost-cutting strategies. We help them to access capital. So many businesses, particularly low-income businesses, disadvantaged businesses, are dramatically undercapitalized and lack some of the opportunities unless we help them with that. So we have publicized Burbank's emergency programs, as well as other cities and federal and state programs to help companies connect with loans, grants, and other types of assistance. We help companies to find qualified employees as well. As you may know, the pandemic has dramatically disrupted our labor markets, and we're helping companies to connect with the talented staff that they need to help them stay in business and to grow and thrive, which serves a double purpose of helping job seekers to find and connect with job training, to upskill and command higher salaries during these difficult times, as well as finding those job opportunities. And then fifth and finally, we help companies to identify locations in our region where they can locate. So we help advertise vacant commercial spaces in Burbank where there are opportunities for companies to move in and help strengthen our economy and create local jobs. So toward that end, in recent years, the Alliance has helped about 1,700 participants to get access to educational information, and we have facilitated the deployment of $1.3 million in capital to 157 local small businesses, retaining 141 jobs. Next slide. So how does that impact the city of Burbank, you might wonder? We've been working with 75 Burbank businesses and constituents with educational webinars. We've been doing a one-on-one coaching and consulting program with about 10 Burbank small businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, various companies that come to us for that kind of assistance. This assistance is confidential, so we're not mentioning their names unless they have given us permission to do so. But to give you a sampling, we have referred Burbank Financial Management Company to startup loans, a Burbank Talent Agency with COVID emergency assistance. We've recently helped a Burbank Sports Entertainment Company to connect with traditional commercial lenders and understand the distinctions between that type of lending and alternative lending, which offers some more additional flexibility, as well as other companies that you can see that we have been connecting with. We really touch all industries, all kinds of companies that may need assistance. But that's not all. Next slide, please. This past year, we've really partnered very aggressively with featuring speakers from Burbank. There's such a wealth of knowledge in the city and thought leaders that really need to be shared with the city, with the region. So we have hosted speakers, for example, from Avion Burbank to talk about the commercial real estate that's available so that companies might know of the opportunities for locating there. We featured Economic Development Manager Mary Hamzoyan in one of our Economic Development Committee meetings to do a spotlight on the city of Burbank. And she made a phenomenal presentation on the benefits of locating in Burbank, some of the programs and assistance that have been provided to Burbank businesses, some of the tourism programs, and many of the business attraction initiatives that are taking place in the city. So it was a great way for the broader region to really learn about what's happening here. The replay and the slides are available on our website as well. They're evergreen so that folks who even weren't able to attend that evening or that day will be able to access the information, and we continue to share it out. Next slide, please. In addition, the Alliance is proud to host our annual meeting every year where we install our new board of directors, and we were so thrilled that Mayor Talamantes joined us and made some wonderful comments and presented the City of Burbank's annual report video, which was well received by all in attendance at the Valley Relics Museum. And we're very thankful that we're able to partner with the city every year in that way and have some very important comments about the landmark achievements of the city and get that out. Next slide, please. And speaking of great times, there's always the Valley of the Stars annual gala, our 24th annual gala, where Mayor Talamantes was present, as well as our board members, Nick Schultz and Constantine Anthony. And we were so very thrilled to hold the gala in the city of Burbank for the first time in memory. We had 360 guests at the Castaway Burbank. People were admiring the beautiful views and the wonderful service and food, and many of our guests, which were sponsors, individuals of means from around the valley, were just so impressed with what's happening in the city of Burbank, and we're very excited to think about how they can be more involved. And next slide, please. We also, we take the opportunity to engage in collaborative communication. City of Burbank has so many wonderful ways to access businesses and many wonderful programs like tech talks, tourism programs, etc. So we feature Burbank fairly frequently in our newsletter, which we distribute widely. And we do recaps of programs where Burbank is featured. And then we do digital tourism campaigns, talking about some of the wonderful restaurants here and destinations and amenities that folks might want to learn about and take part in. The Alliance is very interested in further establishing the San Fernando Valley region as a global tech hub, and with Burbank's landmark work in that area, we're natural and fast partners in bringing that about. So we help cross-promote technology programs, tech founders, and the Tech Talk program, and to augment what's happening there. Last slide, please. And the best is yet to come. So we are very interested in your ideas, your continuing partnership, and in the next year ahead, I'd say we really want to transition, in addition to the pandemic recovery work that we're doing, we're looking at what more needs to be done with regard to promoting the development of housing. We're looking at how we can continue to promote Burbank's achievements in environmental sustainability and encouraging more participation from small businesses and residents in that regard. We are looking at how we can really stir urban revitalization in any underinvested areas of our region and help attract developers to really look at vacant parcels and create the highest, best use and job creating and housing creating purposes for those. So we're very thankful to be partners with such a great city, and we're looking forward to the year ahead at your service. So thank you so much. And are there any questions for us?
Ms. Blake, I just want to say thank you for your presentation. And one question real quick. What is your relationship with Chamber of Commerce's?
Oh, certainly. So we're very collegial with other nonprofit organizations like chambers. We don't have formal relationships with chambers. We don't personally have members like chambers do. We have our 83-member board of directors, and those are the only members of our organization. Everyone else is a stakeholder that we serve at no cost. But one of the ways that we love to work with chambers is to cross-promote programs. Right. And there are times when chambers have grant programs to provide certain services, business assistance to businesses, and we make sure that we share those out so that our companies will be able to take advantage of those. Other than that, we do work with the United Chambers of Commerce on a buy local campaign, usually at holiday times, sometimes twice a year, to really get people thinking about how important it is to support our local small businesses as the backbone of our economy. And so those are some ways that we work with chambers, but we're very eager to continue to work with them and others however we can to advance the mission.
Thank you for that. Colleagues, any questions? Councilmember Frutos?
Ms. Blake, I want to give you a public acknowledgement to say thank you. If you remember, you and I had a pretty tough conversation
I'll never
back
forget.
in 2020 when I was the mayor because I was questioning the expenditure. Not personally, but I was asking, what are the benefits for the amount of money that the taxpayers are paying for the city and the council to be a part of it? And you had just taken over. You said, Bob, please be honest with me. And I explained my concerns for the amount of money. I didn't see anything in return prior to your leadership position. And I wanted to acknowledge you publicly because everything we've talked about in 2020, you took it to heart. And you did not give me lip service. You gave me a really good conversation. You took notes to now when I'm reviewing your report and listening to you very closely, it took me back to 2020 when I was the vice mayor and you had just taken that position, and I expressed to you, Burbank isn't getting anything at that time. Thank you for being a leader of your word, and thank you for moving our city forward with supporting our small businesses. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. I appreciate that very much, and I just acknowledge the whole team that helped to make that happen, including the City of Burbank's own economic development team and our board of directors. So thank you, Bob. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your candor in the beginning, which enabled us with the data we needed, the feedback we needed to make some change, and we're just getting started, so let's keep it going.
Any other questions, colleagues? Oh, Councilmember Springer?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Blake, for your presentation. It's very nice to see you. And I'm glad to hear you noted housing as a part of the Alliance, Valley Economic Alliance moving forward, that you would explore that. Do you have an idea of what you'll do, or you're in the formulation process?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the question. It's so wonderful to see you. And so the Alliance has 4 initiative committees that work on different issues. There's economic development, workforce development to help job seekers find their way, livable and sustainable communities, and promoting the Valley. So for livable and sustainable communities, housing is really at the core of that. We recognize that housing, environmental sustainability, public safety, beautification are all kinds of quality of life issues that play into whether a company or a resident wants to move into the area or stay here. And so the Alliance this past year, through the Livable Sustainable Communities Committee, has initiated a digital marketing campaign to appeal to local residents to support housing and to support their cities and the elected officials in their housing elements and the plans to try to address the housing crisis. So we've been able to do various Facebook campaigns and get people thinking about it, because so often there's opposition to housing near us. So we're trying to help our residents understand the need for housing and that they can be supportive of the development of housing. So that's one of the ways where we are partnering with the various cities to come alongside and augment and get people to smooth the way and show their support for housing. So we look forward to continuing to get the word out in that way. And we've also been partnering with Hope of the Valley to get the word out about their programs, their tiny homes and their homeless housing solutions, and featuring their work so that folks can understand what's happening here at the Valley is landmark, and we're doing some groundbreaking work in that area, as well as helping to promote the advancement of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Great, thank you. Councilor Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Blake, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm really glad that my colleagues had a chance to hear about what we've been working on at the Alliance. And I really just wanted to commend you, your leadership, and that of Mr. Gaines, the chair of the board, because we are moving in excellent direction. I also wanted to mention it was a pleasure having the Gala of the Stars right here at Castaway in Burbank, and I would encourage you, and I'll keep mentioning it in private and certainly at board meetings, I'd love to see more events come to Burbank, because we have a lot to offer, and we love to showcase what we have to offer as a community. My only question was, I believe you were talking with Councilmember Springer about our Housing Builds Communities initiative. So my only question was, if folks want to learn more about it, or if they want to lend their voice to the cause, how can they do that?
Oh, certainly. So they can visit our website at thevalley.net/housing, and they can learn about ways that they can get involved and be supportive and even register their support so that there can be a groundswell of support for housing. Thanks so much for the question. We welcome people to do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ms. Blake, you have an open invitation to come back more often.
My
Okay?
joy.
And share with us what the Alliance is doing, and we as a partner obviously are a big factor in that as well. So,
Absolutely.
Open invitation. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership and your service and support.
Thank you. Mr. McDougall, will you please report on closed session?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. City Council met in closed session this evening to discuss one item of anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4. City Council voted unanimously with Vice Mayor Constantine Anthony absent to retain special counsel and to initiate litigation against the manufacturers of PFAS chemicals.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. You know, and I was negligent of not to mention, thank the staff that works with Ms. Blake. Mary Hasmonian obviously has been very active, and her staff as well. So I want to thank them for doing what they do. Thank you very much. Now is the time for general public comment. For members of the public who are here in person and wish to speak, please present a completed yellow general public comment card to the city clerk. Any person speaking during general public comment may address the council on any matter concerning city business and/or any agenda item. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. In order to promote a fairness, please stay within your maximum allotted time of 3 minutes. A timer is available on the podium to help the speaker keep track of how much time is left. Please state your name for the record. For those wishing to call in during the general public comment period, please call now at 818-238-3335. One more time, that's 818-238-3335. Callers will be placed in a queue until all in-person comments have been received. I've got several cards here. So our first speaker will be Joel Schultzman, followed by Kevin Muldoon. Welcome.
Good to be here. Thank you. Good evening. My comments tonight, of course, have to do with our ignoramus vice mayor. This is my phone number, 818-563-1234. And I invite anybody to call me if they have any questions about his character or anything to report about his character. Any concerns, I'm happy to talk with you. I do not have caller ID, and you can call me anonymously. I'm hoping a reporter will hear my voice and look into these very serious allegations against the mayor and his character. I'm hoping that the police department will call me, and, you know, I told you I played a recording of him being accused of inappropriate activity with an underage boy, and I've since learned that that boy's name is Brandon, and the vice mayor picked this boy up at a homeless shelter, and I think that there's a very good chance that this case could be solved. The vice mayor has a 10-year-old son, and the 10-year-old son is reporting that the vice mayor, his father, has him sleeping in a closet, and this is concerning to me. It goes to his character. This 10-year-old son is reporting, as a punishment, his father, the vice mayor, has him standing up against the wall with his nose against the wall, inside a circle, on his tippy toes. Now, I'm a father, I've got 4 children, and I would never do something like that to my children. I would consider that torture. This is a serious allegation, and it would not surprise me if it has not been looked into by Child Protective Services, CPS, and the police department, I'm sure, I'm sure they paid a visit to his apartment, because it is such a serious allegation. This child wrote a letter, and the letter begins with, "I don't deserve to be here." Okay? This is somebody that you're talking about promoting to the position of mayor here in our city. Now, when the vice mayor heard about this letter, he ordered it destroyed. But the letter was not destroyed. And I've made you copies of it so you can read the letter for yourself. And I've asked the city clerk to make it public. And anybody else who wants to read this letter can look at it as well. So please give consideration to the character of the vice mayor. There's a lot going on here that deserves to be looked into. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Kevin Muldoon, followed by Andre Dreonzian.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I gotta go fast. Okay, first of all, I'm hoping you will appoint Simon Ehrlich to the planning board. I think he'll be thorough and dedicated to the position, and I think he's the most qualified amongst them all. I also want to thank Captain Crimmins and Lieutenant Fromer for reaching out to me over the issue I emailed you all on. I had a great conversation with Captain Crimmins. We talked about a lot of things, and he even gave me a lot of advice about the homeless situation and a better way to handle it when we find someone homeless on the street. And it's basically called a non-emergency number. The office we have is more set up to find housing for people and not handle somebody who's in need of immediate care on the side of the street. I want to know, are all the building projects going to have to curtail their use of fresh water during that 2 weeks in September? I know the front street down there has a big 12-inch main, and I don't know if that's reclaimed or that's fresh water that they use for their project. They got 3 huge semi containers that they put water in called Rain for Hire. So I'm hoping that they'll be as stringent with their water during this time as you're asking the residents to be. And I cornered Miss Lindell out in the hall because, Jess, you're right on. We need to get the Manhattan Project on reclaimed water in this community. Forget the library, forget the Civic Center. Water is life or death for this community. We need to get reclaimed water into our system. We need to be able to blend it. We're already purifying the chromium-6 out of our drinking water, so what's a little bit of sewage water going into our blend? So I think we're wasting a precious opportunity within our community. I know Orange County has overcome their problems using reclaimed water. So I think it's really, really something. And I'm actually looking on Facebook Marketplace. I'm going to buy one of those 275-gallon, 2 of them, so I can put one in my truck and then transfer it into the one in my yard and put a hose in there so I can water my plants. Now, I was going to fill my pool, but Miss Lindell told me it's not potable. So I'm not going to be doing that, even though it doesn't scare me. The water's pretty darn clean. So great to be here. Like you say, Bob, it's good to be in this room again, and it's good seeing you all.
Thank you. Next speaker is Andre, followed by Gloria Salas.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Andre Dionysian. Close enough, yeah. I wanted to talk about the appointment to the vacancy on the planning board. I was actually interested in applying, and I decided not to because I'm attending community college right now, and I want to be able to dedicate, enough of my time to do a good service, and I came to the conclusion I wasn't able to. That said, I just wanted to encourage you all to, whoever is appointed, to keep in mind that I think there are a few important points they should be in support of. Intelligent application of density. We have density is a sticky topic. We don't want too much, but too little can create housing problems. And so knowing when and where to encourage density is very important. Second, zoning reform. We have a zoning map that is way heavily skewed towards single-family housing. And it's important, but we also have to acknowledge that our community is growing. And we have to accept that growth and intelligently expand areas of density to allow more people to come and join our wonderful community. And when we apply density, we also need to ensure that it is transit-oriented. Developments, new developments specifically with relatively high, medium to high density, should be designed so that they have immediate access to existing and new transit systems, so that we are not only allowing more people to come into the community, but those people don't bring more cars and more gasoline that then pollutes our environment. And of course, the bottom line of this is Burbank needs to be more walkable. And that needs to be reflected in our strategy when it comes to planning. We need to encourage walkability everywhere and anywhere that we can. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Gloria Salas, followed by Simon Hamill.
Good evening, Mayor Talamantes, council, and staff. I'm wearing my Zonta hat right now, so I just wanted to let you know, and I'm sure most of you do know, that the U.S. Department of Justice has declared human trafficking as the fastest growing criminal enterprise in this country. California has the third highest rate of human trafficking in the nation. Unfortunately, the pandemic has created an easy avenue for predators to use very creative means to exploit, groom, and reach children into sexploitation or human trafficking. And the way we fight human trafficking is through advocacy, awareness, and prevention. The Zonta Club of Burbank, which is a member of Zonta International, which is a 103-year-old organization which was formed to empower women and girls. Through its many clubs in the world, it's been involved in the anti-human trafficking campaign for more than 30 years. In order to stop this heinous crime, the state of California passed several bills, which the governor has signed, various governors have signed, mandating certain businesses to post a notice in a conspicuous place near the public entrance that would indicate the human trafficking number. It would be to the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. This bill, which was originally signed in 2012, was amended in 2017 to include hotels and motels. A subsequent amendment took place in 2019. Violation of the posting mandate results in a $500 fine for the first offense and $1,000 for subsequent offenses. The Zonta Club of Burbank members have been actively involved in the poster compliance movement in the city of Los Angeles, visiting hotels and motels in various Los Angeles districts. I know Burbank is aware of this, and it's high time to move this along. My church is making this a priority. So my question is, why isn't Burbank, and why is the city dragging its feet? And as we know that the pandemic has created such a horrible situation with sexploitation of children because they are behind a computer screen, they have their cell phones, and their parents are not always watching what they're actually involved with and who they're involved with on the other end of that screen. So hopefully we will be moving along with this, and we have a whole plan. When you need advice, we have Zonta Club of Burbank members who would gladly help you in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Simon Hamill, and that's the last card I have. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Simon Ehrlich Hamill, and I am applying for the open position on the planning board. Land and permitting issues can be contentious. It is extremely important to me that everyone is treated equally under the law and that the law is followed, irrespective of my own or anyone's feeling about it. I'd like to talk about my approach to planning issues. I am open to questioning evidence and to have my mind changed by a persuasive legal argument, and I'm not too proud to admit when I make a mistake. For instance, when last before you, I claimed I was doing amazing things with water, and it has come to my attention that this is not entirely true and has caused me to make a change in my outdoor water use. The point is, my goal is to do an honorable job. I have had serious disagreements with members of our staff since becoming active in our local government, but I am a person that can work professionally and objectively should you see fit to appoint me. In fact, 4 years ago, I was denied an appeal involving the building of a new house across the street from our family home. I strive to be a person that is magnanimous and fair in my dealings. Although at the time I thought I was presenting the matter in a certain light, the board expressed a serious concern that I had cast aspersions on the entire CDD staff. It has come to my attention that this might still be a valid concern. These emails I have for you are dated 3 days after the appeal and are personal individual apologies to the frontline staff that handled the matter. Beyond taking me at my word, I hope these letters document that it is extremely important to me to be civil and respectful, and it bothered me that my presentation was received in the way that it was. I agree with Bob from earlier that it's important to go beyond paying lip service to this and to see it all the way through. Just additionally on that matter, I'd also recently heard there's a rumor going around that there's some kind of litigation from me involving this matter with the city. This is not correct. The last correspondence with the city involved a copy and paste hold letter to preserve documents in the matter, but it's for a complaint with the State of California Board of Professional Engineers and not the city. I can see how a person might be concerned. Please know that I don't think it presents a conflict of interest, and that is a state level issue outside of the planning board's purview. If the council needs clarification for the appointment, I have 10 copies of the hold letter for distribution during that report, if it's the council's pleasure. As far as policy goes, you can see a number of my proposals in my application. I hope we can advance or discuss my idea to promote deed-restricted low and middle-income units beyond the state minimum when built in conjunction with for-sale units in mixed-use projects that exceed the current state minimums, where the city offers first-in, first-out service to all those projects anytime such a matter is needed for inspections or for approval. I'm happy to discuss that or answer questions about it. I will stay through the appointment report in case you have any questions for me or any clarification on any subject. This is too short a time to talk about all of it, and speaking of that, as a side note, I'm a little concerned about the loss of some of our public speaking time, so if there's a way to give people a chance to respond to things that happen at a meeting, I hope you guys will bring some of that back in the future. If I recall, people used to be able to talk at the end. So I hope to advocate for quality of life issues to help keep Burbank a place where people can see themselves living generationally. It would be an honor to serve the city. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's the last in-person speaker. So we've completed in-person comments. For callers, please remember to lower the volume on your TV or computer and take your phone off speaker when you deliver public comment. Madam City Clerk, do we have any callers online?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one caller waiting to go.
Okay, great, thank you. Welcome.
The first caller is Vice Mayor Anthony.
Hello, everyone. This is Vice Mayor.
Welcome.
Constantine. Hello, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to call in. It is 5:22 a.m. here in Athens, Greece, and spending the day today in the birthplace of democracy had me thinking about what's going on back home, and I wanted to just call in and thank the four of you and all of our city staff for showing up every day and doing the great work of governance and doing everything that you can to further democracy back home. I also wanted to thank Sonia Blake and the Valley Economic Alliance for their report. And lastly, I just have to say, you know, there is no 10-year-old in the history of 10-year-olds that thinks that they deserve their punishment. So consequences must be taken, and I encourage everyone to make sure that they lead with compassion in their parenting and in the work that they do every single day. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you guys in a couple weeks when I get back home. Bye.
No, Mr. Mayor, we don't have anyone. Thank you.
So there being no further public comment, I now declare the general public comment period closed. Now is the time for a brief response from City Council, City Manager, and/or the City Attorney. Colleagues, any response to any of the comments? Councilmember Frutos?
Yes, just a brief, thank you, Ms. Solis and the Zonta Club. I'd like to ask the city manager if we can have a follow-up. I believe it's already on the list. If we can have a follow-up with our chief to see where the audit is regarding how many hotels, motels have the required state law advertisement, because I know that's important to Ms. Solis, that we're not in compliance. That's it. That's my comment.
I don't recall that we were doing an audit.
maybe you can follow up with Solis
Councilmember
later.
Frutos, but I do recall Councilmember Schultz had requested an additional item, and it is on our follow-up list to come back.
Okay, great.
So
It's actually on my list.
Okay.
So yeah, he was going to take ownership of that, but we did have that request come from Councilmember Schultz a while back, I believe when Ms. Solis was here at a prior meeting bringing up the issue. And so it is something that we owe. I think at this point it's a workload issue. That's not an excuse, it's just the truth. And that will take resources, but we will come back with a report to the council to talk about that in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Fair enough.
No more, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Ms.
Anyone
Solis.
else? Councilmember Springer?
I'd like to thank everybody for calling, and yes, and thank you for following up with Ms. Solis's recommendation, and so thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Attorney, I wouldn't be doing my job if I couldn't try to pin you down. Do you have even a rough estimate of how soon we could hope to see that first step report back?
So I have a draft first step report discussing the law, and then there will be options that the council will have to, since it was only a first step, then the council would vote on how they wish to proceed and give direction. The request was to evaluate a potential ordinance that I believe the county also has in place. So that's what we're trying to pull together. I would like to bring it to council in September.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
sir. I appreciate that. And then the other comment I would just have is for Mr. Hamill, not related to agenda item 4, but with regards to your comment about the importance of public comment. I agree with you, sir. Notwithstanding what may be out there, I think we all, every one of us, agree on the importance of public comment, and I do have a new agenda item that I will be raising at the end of this meeting related to that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out and sharing your thoughts with us, whether in person or on phone. It's very important that we stay engaged, and obviously sometimes we don't agree with each other, but at least put things on the table for discussion purposes. I don't feel that I know more than anybody else. I've been learning through this whole process on council, so it's not my way or the highway. If you have some ideas and I buy into it, let's go, so be it. But there's people out there that if you don't go with their ideas, you're wrong. And I don't agree to that. I don't agree with that whatsoever. So you get the sense of where I'm going with that. So thank you very much. Madam Assistant City Manager, you have any comments? Mr. McDougall?
No, I do not have any comments. Thank you.
No
Mayor
further
Tomlin.
comments, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you very much. The consent calendar may be enacted in one motion. Madam City Clerk, please read the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Consent calendar, item number 1, and the only item on here is to approve the minutes of the joint meeting of July 19th and the regular meeting of July 26th and the dark meeting of August 2nd. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have several questions about item. I'm just kidding with you there, Madam City Clerk. Unless
I'm
there's
like,
any.
okay, go at it. I'm ready.
No, I reviewed it. It is accurate. I will move the consent calendar.
Thank you.
Second? Councilmember Fruto, second.
Ready
Any
for
further
roll?
discussion, Madam City Clerk?
Councilmember Schultz?
Yes.
Councilmember Frutos?
Yes.
Councilmember Springer?
Yes.
Mayor Talamantes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 reports to council this evening. The first report is the review of the public-private partnership, public infrastructure financing model being considered for potential use in the Burbank Civic Center. Ms. Elizabeth Goldman, Library Services Director, please present the report. Welcome.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor Talamantes, members of City Council. I'm Elizabeth Goldman, the Library Services Director. And if we could have our presentation, those two aren't working. As you are aware, the City of Burbank has spent decades discussing but making little progress on some of our key infrastructure needs, like a replacement Central Library and Civic Center. While they have great value, these infrastructure projects are complex and costly, and often it has seemed most practical in the moment to defer decisions on city infrastructure. About 1.5 years ago, I presented you with the results of the study, A Vision for a New Burbank Central Library. At the time of that presentation, you directed staff to research a feasible way to move forward with the project. Since that time, an interdepartmental staff team has engaged with consultants to consider that question. And in September, we'll be bringing you an update on our specific ideas for the Burbank Civic Center. Tonight, what we want to do is focus on providing you a baseline of understanding about the proposed model for bringing the Civic Center to reality. The public-private partnership, commonly referred to as P3, is an increasingly common tool used by municipalities in order to move their infrastructure projects forward while also meeting community goals and needs. So, can I have the next slide or not yet? Thanks. Okay, so tonight we're going to provide a brief history of Burbank's journey to focusing on P3 as a path forward. Then we'll dive into an explanation of how a P3 is structured, how it benefits you, the public partner, and how it has been used in some regional examples. I do want to emphasize that tonight we're not going to be covering how we propose to apply this model here in Burbank. I know it's going to be very tempting to dive right into the details, but we'd appreciate if your questions tonight can be focused on how the model works, and then we'll be back next month with the specifics of the project in Burbank. Next slide. So to start off, how did Burbank end up considering the P3? And next slide. As far back as 1989, in a facilities master plan, Burbank noted the Central Library, which at the time was just about 25 years old, was in need of renovation and expansion. This was followed by some cosmetic upgrades in the early 1990s. About 10 years later, in 2003, the Community Development Department developed a Civic Center plan that included a new and expanded Central Library, modernized staff office spaces, and open space. The only element of that concept to be completed was the Community Services Building in 2008. A few other attempts to move the library project forward in the following decades also did not result in success. So if we fast forward now to 2020, for the first time in 20 years, we conducted a comprehensive study about the Central Library needs. The Vision for a New Burbank Central Library study involved an assessment of community needs, priorities for use of space, and estimated costs for that building. These were based on research as well as public input. Staff had become aware of the P3 model due to its use in the Long Beach Civic Center down the road from here. And upon council direction to move forward with developing a plan for our library and civic center, we focused on this as a potential avenue. The P3 is a newer tool, but increasingly used by municipalities for infrastructure projects that cost more than $100 million, which is in the estimated cost range of the Burbank Civic Center, a project that will include library, office space, open space, and parking. So along with the library, Public Works, Finance, Community Development, the City Attorney's Office, the City Manager's Office, Parks and Recreation, and BWP have been part of exploring the P3 over the past year. And Mr. Prescott and Mr. Berkman are also here tonight for questions, should you be interested in their perspective. Tonight, again, we're going to focus on the P3 as a model, what it means, what the elements are, and what benefits it might bring to the city. Next month, we'll return with a full presentation updating City Council on our concepts, ideas, and tentative plans for applying this in Burbank's situation. So at this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Orion Fulton from ARUP, who is the consultant and advisor we've been working with on this project.
Welcome.
Thank you, Elizabeth, Mayor Talamantes, Council. I'm pleased to be here to be speaking to you about this topic. As Elizabeth said, my name is Orion Fulton. I'm an associate principal at ARUP, and we're the consultants on this Civic Center project. We're going to cover quite a bit of information. I hope it's useful to you. I think we're going to do the presentation first and then take questions. But if there's any quick clarifications you need, please, by all means, stop me. So first question is, why are we here talking about P3s? If you could go to the next slide, please. One more. We have a couple of forces at play here. Number one, we have a lot of infrastructure we rely on that's deteriorating. It's coming to the end of its useful life. Buildings, roads, all kinds of stuff. The other force at play here is that it is very often that municipalities or asset owners choose to defer maintenance on these facilities for a variety of reasons. Skipping over why they do it, the point is that it's a common practice. And what happens is that can lead to an acceleration of the asset deterioration, and then we are faced with potentially replacing facilities earlier than we needed to, where good operations and maintenance could have preserved the asset, but instead we're using capital dollars, sometimes even our debt service, to replace a facility that maybe didn't need to be replaced. The other issue is that it is hard business maintaining these assets over the long haul, and it's very easy to ignore these issues because they don't crop up overnight. A roof will leak, but sometimes issues will linger for 5-10 years, and you're able to keep going through Band-Aids, but then at some point you're faced with, wow, the asset needs replacement and we need to do it sooner than later. I think the library is maybe a case in point in what I'm describing here. Municipalities are finding, as they look into this issue more and more, that at a portfolio level, that these can be pretty large liabilities, not accounting liabilities, but liabilities that require staff time, budget, research, analysis, and ultimately expenditures, sometimes big expenditures to maintain these assets. Next slide. So those challenges, I think, help enumerate the potential benefits of P3s. One of the big aspects of P3s and the benefits you gain is a more robust analysis of how you transfer risk to the party that is best able to manage that risk when you're delivering a project. That's true of both the construction time, the design and construction time, as well as over the long term with operations and maintenance and replacement of components of that asset. What P3s aim to do is take the total cost of ownership, the total lifetime of this asset, and try to think about cost throughout that entire period, not just how do I manage to get my first costs under my budget, not realizing that you might be setting yourself up for more investment later that you're not planning for. And you ask a private party to come in and work with you as a partner to try to optimize those costs. So you make trade-offs between what will it cost you today and what might it cost you tomorrow, and how do you know that that entire package is best value to you as the owner. P3s use performance-based contracting. And this is all these concepts we're going to talk about in a little bit more specificity in the presentation. Performance-based contracting is effectively, it is a way to create projects on time and on schedule, to make sure that proper investment is made in your asset, and many other details about how the parties, the roles and responsibilities that the parties play. P3s use private financing. So where most municipalities are accustomed to using public finance or municipal finance, the issuing of bonds, P3s commonly use a private financing scheme where your development partner secures the funding, the financing for the project, and you, the city or the owner, starts making payments only after the project is built. And we'll talk a bit more about that. And importantly, in California, we've seen a couple of projects where P3s have shown to be a catalytic type of delivery model for achieving other goals, such as bringing together civic, like vertical construction, like the Civic Center they will be talking about next month, with housing or with commercial development or with a hotel. And that enables you to help fund the public project, as well as catalyze the economic development that comes with the project. And bundling that has certain benefits that we'll talk about. So we're going to go through some general terms in this first section, and then we're going to talk about some concepts behind that and details. So hopefully everything on this slide that I've just told you, you will understand and be able to tell me at the end of the session. So quickly, a little bit about the types of P3s. On the slide here, you see toll roads, you see the Long Beach Courthouse, you see UC Merced, and you see Hudson Yards project in New York, all examples of P3s. A lot of P3s are basically, they're self-sustaining. They make sense. You can capture toll revenue in a stream that is able to then repay whatever debt or financing you use to build that. Bridges, toll roads are a great example of that. Other times, P3s are more based on a service you get from the developer, and the owner pays for the availability of that asset. So it's not linked to revenue collection, it's linked to a commitment to pay a certain amount if the facility is available. And so like the Long Beach Courthouse, the Long Beach Civic Center, UC Merced, these are examples of that type of project. There are other types of examples that you may think of, right? So within energy or water production, property development, project like stadiums, airport terminals, even affordable housing has a component of private development using public authority to build and or financing from the public. Sometimes the public is also, or the owner is lending, it's basically its credit to the project as the payer of the payments to the developer. So there's a wide variety of these, and they hold some of the same principles that I started with. Next slide, please. So there's a range of delivery options that we're talking about here. And this slide shows a whole variety of them. On the left, really you have delivery. These are project delivery models that are focused on first costs, getting projects built, design and construction. On the far right, you have examples of where it's effectively private industry. It's somebody that's designing, building, owning, and maintaining an asset, like a power plant or something would be an example of that. And it might be on public land through some type of lease agreement. And the gray box is kind of where we're focused in this presentation. So this is where you're focused on there being some form of project finance and or there's some form of long-term asset preservation. The O&M is included in the project to get some of the benefits that I described there. Notably, the project where there's project financing, this, as I said, the developer secures that, and that's a really important element we'll talk more about. They effectively set up a special purpose entity, an LLC or something that manages and runs the project. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And in almost all cases, ownership remains with the public owner. So none of these P3s are privatization or full concessions, that kind of thing. You maintain ownership in almost all circumstances. Next slide. In the United States and in California, design bid build is our most common form of procurement. We design the project, we then go out to tender and we ask for bids from contractors. They give us their best price. Typically, you select the lowest price, which is not always best value, but you select the lowest price. And the financing of the project, if there is any, is some type of municipal bond for a public project. And then once that project is built, the maintenance and operation are handled by the public owner. There are some real risks in that many of us in this room are probably familiar with, right? We read about projects being over budget or schedule delays, and why are they happening? Or we hear about contractors lowballing, or we hear about the multitude of change orders that are occurring on a project. These are the sorts of things that are almost taken for granted in the design bid build process. When the projects are small and they're manageable or not very complex, it's not usually an issue. Projects can still be delivered on time and on schedule, and there's lots of professional staff and consultants that can do that. When projects become major projects, when they get complex, especially the really big infrastructure projects, things get complicated, schedules slip, budgets go over budget. There are challenges. One other thing is that the capital delivery, that upfront project of design and construction, largely is divorced from how you're going to run that asset later, how you're going to maintain that building. You get it built and then you turn around and hand it to staff, or you hand it to a short-term O&M provider who, just makes sure that the building keeps running. And the actual capital expenditure is divorced from the operating expenses of the asset. The P3 model kind of attacks those same things and approaches the project differently to do some of the things I've talked about, to align the incentives of the parties, to create contractual obligations, performance-based contracting, to hit schedule milestones, to not go over budget, to maintain the facility at a certain condition over time, and it can't drop, and a third party can actually look at that and opine on that. So there's a lot of differences for how we kind of handle business today with a design bid build and how we do a P3, and so it takes some thinking through and understanding, and that's partly why we're having this meeting. Next slide, please. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. You have it in front of you, but this is important because it starts to get at the essence of the relationships in a P3 and how risk is transferred and who's on the hook for what. So starting at the top, let's say that's the city, a municipal public partner who wants to have a project built. They enter into a P3 contract with a special purpose vehicle, that's SPV, or a project company. Okay, that is an LLC or some form of project entity that's set up to deliver the project for the public owner. That entity is set up and managed by the equity providers on the right, and they're looking to make a return by taking on and managing all the risk that you want to give them through the contract. You don't want them to spend all the equity because that would be really expensive, and they don't want to take all that risk themselves either. They want others to be with them to take that risk, so they oftentimes go to lenders. Those can be bondholders, those can be banks, those can be reinsurer investors. There's a variety of lender types that would participate, and they're looking to make a return on their money by ensuring that that SPV knows what they're doing, has a track record, and has a good plan in place to mitigate risk. So how do they do that? Well, design and construction that risk is passed down to a design build contractor, and they use design build principles to design and build the project together, not as a separate stage gate process. They have the architect and some of the specialty engineering disciplines, as well as the contractor and the owner, and sometimes and the equity, the SPV, all sitting in a room together, figuring out how are they going to deliver this project on time and on budget? How are they going to optimize life cycle? And they really have to work through that. They also have to provide elements of security that make the lenders comfortable. So, for example, a lender is providing project a significant investment. Well, they're going to want to know that their exposure to the construction risk is minimized. So the design build contractor is asked to put up forms of guarantees that help the banks get comfortable that they are minimizing their risk. Lenders don't like risk, right? So what that helps do is basically, it's not the city that's necessarily on the hook to have to figure out what exactly that security package should be. You're saying, SPV, you go figure that out. You work with the lenders and your contractor, and you satisfy the lenders, right? And if the lenders are satisfied, I'm satisfied. And we'll talk a little bit more about that relationship, but that's really how the P3 manages this construction risk. It's different than how you do business today. During the operations and maintenance phase, you have what's called a facilities management contractor, or O&M contractor. Now, typically they show up after the project's built, and you say, do you want to manage this project for me? In a P3, they're at the table during design. And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, if you cut corners and you go buy carpet instead of terrazzo, I'm going to be replacing that carpet every 7 years. Is that what you want to do? Okay, then let's do it. If you want to not have those maintenance costs later, let's think about something different. And that's just one small example, but there's a lot of trade-offs that go on between the first cost and the life cycle, and they're sitting at the table to help make sure the parties understand what's going on with those costs out in the future. The last thing I'll say is that this is all wrapped up in the P3 contract, and what it does is it makes sure that that developer that you're partnering with has all the right people in place that have the skill to manage what they're supposed to manage, right? And the lenders are there basically looking over this entire project to make sure that their risk is mitigated, and that's a benefit to you. Last point is that operator, that operations and maintenance person, or that team, and the design build contractor, they have to talk to one another, and they actually have an agreement that sets out the rules for how they work together. That's really important for the reasons that I stated right around the fact that life cycle costs are really important, and when you're thinking about the entire cost of a project like this to a city or municipality. One more slide and I'll pause briefly if there's any clarifications. So really, one really important point here is that you don't do P3s just to deal with the first cost, right? You have aspects, you have a delivery method like design build finance, and that really helps with getting the project, managing risk to get the project built. But a P3 also typically brings in this O&M perspective. Let's take, for example, a building. Most buildings are designed, the useful life is designed to 75 years, right? How many of us are working in buildings that are more than 75 years old? We're in one today, but they're not very common, right? These buildings get replaced before the end of their useful life, sometimes way before. And so what you see in this terrible graphic that we provided you here is that from top to bottom, the things that we sweat bullets about, the procurement and the construction, that's a tiny fraction of the period of time that this asset's going to exist. And we oftentimes ignore that 65, 70 years of life that this asset's going to have. And if we don't think about that, we're going to run into trouble. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Before I dive in on benefits, I'll just pause briefly and just see if there's any clarifications. Keep going. Okay. So we're gonna dig in a little bit to some of these. We talked about sort of the benefits at a high level, and now we're going to kind of dig in a little more to each one. So in terms of, like, we talked about design, bid, build versus P3. This is really, ultimately, P3s are about transferring risk. And the concept of transferring risk is, risk doesn't always happen. Risk is the potential that something could happen. And that's based on a whole number of things, from, competencies to available budget, to unforeseen events happening. There's a whole number of ways that risks can sort of manifest. But the point of a P3 is to say, who's best to manage this, right? And so that gets into, well, who does the public owner want to partner with, and why? Is it the is it the past? Is it what happened to us previously? Like, we got burned before and we don't want to do that again, or we are understaffed, or we are, we might have a number of reasons why a P3 is interesting to us, and we want to explore that. And that's ultimately because you're trying to not get burned again. You don't want to have this risk sort of hot potato on your hands. And so what P3s do is they give you this tool set to be smarter about how you're transferring risk and weighing that cost benefit of, is it worth, if there's an additional price, right? Is it worth it to do a P3, or is it not? And we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. But I think fundamentally this risk transfer can be summed up in, as I described, the first costs, right? The capital construction and design, or it's in the long-term operations and maintenance phase of a project. And as I noted in the beginning, cities often struggle with major project delivery, and that's not to point fingers. It's that you don't deliver major projects that often. Most of our work is more routine, and in the wheelhouse of an experience of staff, and then a major project comes along, and you have to evaluate how you're gonna tackle that in the best manner fit for the city, considering the city's interests. Next slide, please. So this is a little, this graph here is a little sort of example of that risk that I was talking about. So these larger major projects are just more likely to have cost overruns and or schedule delays, and there's a lot of data out there that sort of supports this. This happens to be Caltrans data, and we all are familiar with headlines about Caltrans projects being delayed and costing more than were promised. I'm from the Bay Area, so we built some expensive bridges up there. But the data says that if they are more sort of bread and butter projects, Caltrans can deliver an interchange or an overpass, or these smaller projects. They can deliver that stuff all day long, on time and on schedule and on budget, using traditional means, design, bid, build, for example. But when they get into the major projects, the performance falls off very quickly in terms of cost overruns and schedule overruns. And municipalities aren't Caltrans, right? These are different asset types, these are different types of construction, et cetera. However, it's a very illustrative data set to understand the point here. There's a recent study done of about 212 projects across the US looking at a range of building types that showed that the design build method yields a 4% lower cost growth than design bid build, and almost 100% faster schedule delivery. And this is, the design build method's been around a long time, but it's gained a lot of prominence in the last 10 years or so for this exact reason. And there's a lot of government entities that do have to deliver assets, like the state of California, or the UC system, or the Administrative Office of the Courts in California, have all looked at P3 and used P3 to try to get better at their capital delivery of their courthouses and universities and the like. And it's a sign that, design build is a tool worth understanding for your major projects. Next slide, please. The other end of the spectrum, after a project is built, very often that total cost of ownership of that asset is still less than 50%. So you've spent all this money to build the project and you're not at 50% of your expenditures yet, right? You have all this O&M, and this slide is it's from data in the Long Beach Civic Center, but it illustrates the point, right? Of the total cost of that project over a 40-year term, only about 40% is design and construction cost. You've got a ton of cost in here related to maintenance, energy costs, utilities, and a life cycle replacement reserve that is going to be funded a little bit every year, but it's going to slowly take care of all those systems that fall apart: the roof, the HVAC, the carpeting, these core building systems that you need, elevators that you need to not only maintain, but you need to prepare to replace at some point because they come to the end of their system useful life. So P3s, really, the essence of them is asking your development partner to take all those costs and say, you optimize those. In a competitive environment, competing against a different development team, you tell us what is your plan for helping the city get best value out of not just your first cost, but your total cost of the asset. That is a huge value add of the P3 to a municipality building a project. Next slide, please. The other area in terms of the long-term asset preservation risk is around preserving the value of the asset. So this graphic is illustrative. It's not based on actual data except for the beginning and end dates or data points. But they had the blue line represents their city hall, right? And over a 40-year period from when it was built to when this contract got inked, it lost almost 50% of its value through deferred maintenance and just lack of upkeep, right? And so you take that same time frame of the new project in Long Beach, which I'll talk a bit more about later in the case studies. Under a DBFOM model, there would be a contractual requirement that asset couldn't get lower than about 80% of replacement value. So that difference of what happened with the old building and what is supposed to happen with the new building, let's say the building costs $200 million to build, you're preserving about $64 million worth of asset that you don't have to spend at the end of 40 years. Those are big dollars, right? As opposed to at the end of the next 40 years doing another $200 million project. And so you do lock up more money and you pay a bit of a premium to make sure that asset stays in good condition, but you're also not faced with a big bill at the end of that term. So that comparison is those two lines show how the P3 kind of helps preserve the value of your asset over time. Next slide, please. There's a couple, let's go back. There were a couple terms that I want to make sure you're familiar with. So how do you actually calculate what I just told you? So asset value is basically at any given point in time is how much repair is needed to get that facility back to a state of good repair divided by its replacement value. So there's always a ratio that you can look at between the assessed current condition of the asset and how much it would cost to replace the asset in any given year. That's your facility condition index, that ratio. And how do you do that? Well, I think Public Works Director has been in front of you guys before explaining the benefits of doing facility condition assessments and understanding what the current condition is of assets and what the implications are of knowing that and how to handle that. So P3s are a way of attacking that for major projects, not necessarily at a portfolio level, although there are portfolio level P3s that exist. That is a facility condition assessment, helps you assess that replacement value, that helps you assess the condition of the asset over time. Next slide. So I mentioned performance-based contracting. So what is that? Fundamentally, the performance nature of a P3 is that it's really trying to help align incentives in the interest of minimizing the risk to the public owner. Okay, I talked a little bit like the lenders, right, in their role, and they're looking over the shoulder of equity, making sure that nothing's going wrong, and they want guarantees from their contractor, and they're saying, hey, I want to give you this money at 4%, but I don't want this coming back. I don't want any problems, right? So there's a real analysis that goes on there. And the developer is responsible for securing that financing typically. So what happens is basically the lenders are looking to minimize their risk, which protects you. And in the process of doing that, they do a number of things, right? So in the construction period, the lenders are, when they're talking about how much money they have to lend, they're looking at the contractor's experience, their track record, not just with building the similar asset types, but like how many like do they show up on lists in the state of California for penalties for lack of safety or all kinds of things. The lenders will really dig into that, and advisors like me help you understand that too as the owner. But they're looking to the contractor ultimately, because this LLC that was formed to build the project, they're not the ones building this thing. They're not the ones putting their neck on the line, but they've hired a contractor who needs to be very experienced that's going to deliver that. Okay, and the lenders are going to look at that. They're also going to be looking at the entire P3 contract, and they're going to be looking at the credit analysis of the whole project. In the operating period, the lenders are looking at how any risks to the project revenue that's being used to pay them back. So in the operating period, there is the lenders are going to want to understand how the payments work in the P3. And the way payments work in the P3 is typically they are subject to a key performance indicator regime, or KPIs. And those deal with how the asset performs over time or how the developer performs over time. So an example would be elevators. Elevators have scheduled maintenance all the time, right? When we tell everybody next week elevator A is going to be down for 2 days because we're going to be repairing it. Well, if that elevator goes down and it's not a scheduled repair, now staff can't get to work at 8:30 or whatever it is, and there's a problem. So what happens? In a normal construction and O&M process, everybody just suffers through it, and you call the people and they come out there and they fix it and you get back on track. In a P3, you call the developer and the clock's ticking, and when the end of the month, you deduct some of their payments because there was a problem that was unforeseen and they didn't deal with it in a proper time. That's one example of many that the KPIs deal with. So when the payment comes up, the reason it's performance-based is because there can be deductions on what you pay the developer for their performance. This is a really important concept because in the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about how those payments work, and if there are deductions, the developer may not get the full payment that they're expecting in that month, and that hurts their return on investment. Next slide, please. So, sticking with this concept of performance-based contracting and the payment deductions, these payments effectively follow a hierarchy, which in the industry we call a waterfall. And that waterfall dictates what uses of funds happen when and the order in which they happen. And so you see on your screen here the order of operations for what gets funded when a municipality makes one of their payments to the developer. First, off the top is all the facility needs are met. Second, your reserve fund is fully funded for life cycle replacement funds. Then you handle your debt service. Finally, at the end, you pay back equity. So if the developer, which is the people that have put equity into the project, remember that graphic I showed you earlier of the different parties, if there's a shortage of funds, that bucket is dry or only gets partially filled. Okay, that's the concept. So it is, if it is in their interest to make sure that there are no performance deductions, right? That's the game. You can contractually deduct points, and in bad situations, owners have and will deduct points. But the whole idea is for that never to happen, right? They stay on top of everything. They stay on top of the O&M provider. They can fire the contractor if it's not working out and things are going wrong. They're gonna replace somebody who's not performing at the highest level because their equity return is at risk. That is in essence how the payments and the performance-based contracting aligns incentives, as I said before. Next slide, please. So a couple other points. So we talked a little bit about financing, so I'm going to come back to that for a moment. There's a couple other points to make. So I mentioned a couple times the developer secures the financing. And the lenders, they have to convince the lenders that they have a good, credible plan, they have the right roles and responsibilities, they have the right team, and they're going to be able to mitigate the risks to make the lenders happy. Additionally, there's a couple other benefits to the public owner. One is you're not using your own debt, so you will have a payment obligation on your books that you have to pay to have beneficial use of this building, let's say. But it's not drawing out of your debt capacity. So for some cities or counties, that's really important. We'll talk about the Vermont Corridor Project, LA County, later in the case studies. The other aspect is that you know exactly how much it's going to cost you for the entire contract term on day one. So when you sign the contract, you know how much debt you're paying, you know how much equity you're paying, you know how much is going into the O&M, you know how much is going into your reserves, and you know that building in 20 or 5 to 30 or 40 years is going to be handed back to you with a facility condition index of a certain amount. And if the developer fails to do all of that along the way, well, there's deductions that you're gonna take for lack of performance. But importantly, it's a very predictable and stable environment process. The O&M costs are ring-fenced in a way, right? So if you have a downturn in the economy, let's say, and you're trying to make payroll, or you're trying to make difficult decisions about how to use your budget, it's going to be harder for you to go grab that O&M money for one of these P3s and spend it on something else because it's been dedicated to taking care of this asset. And that's an important point. You know, it's limiting, it limits government from using the money for another reason, even if that other reason is very important. Because it's all within the contract of the P3. And as I alluded to earlier, there are certain reasons why that's important in and of its own right, because deferring maintenance is kind of like borrowing against your facility condition and the value of that asset to pay for something else in the short term. But if you don't come back to it, you're carrying that interest of the deferred maintenance over time. So P3s say, no, we got to take care of this asset. I don't want this to be a liability later. You package it all up. The other thing to note is that there are cases where the developer secures financing, but it's public financing. You don't have to use project finance or private financing. And this is typically looked at when that spread of the interest rates between a taxable project, project financing the developer secures, and what you could get through a revenue bond, let's say, or other type of municipal finance in the capital markets, that difference is so great that you say, it's not worth it. You know, it might be, the number, that interest that you pay is so great, it may not make sense to make that additional payment for the amount of risk transfer that you're getting. But the key benefit here is not that you can use other financing. The key benefit is that P3s help you make that evaluation before you commit yourself to some big project. You get to look at that before you secure financing. Next slide. As you'll see in the Long Beach Civic Center case study, their P3s are a great tool and method for achieving multiple policy goals. Long Beach Civic Center, which I had the pleasure of being part of, was sort of dubbed the hybrid P3. And the concept there is the public asset was built using a DBFOM. But what was also enacted in the same contract was certain development rights by the developer to, in this case, purchase and use and then the city could use those proceeds from the land sale to help fund the public project. So we'll talk about Long Beach in a moment, but they sold 2 parcels that gave them almost $30 million to put towards the public project that they needed, and they put certain development requirements on those parcels when they sold them to make sure there was affordable housing built and that it was downtown and that it met other goals that they had. And by combining those things and having one support the other in sort of like a synergy, they were able to get a lot of housing built and get their public project built. And all of that was a huge economic development catalyst for, the economic development director told me, over $1 billion of additional investment made by the private sector in other projects around that because of the government's commitment to that project. Now, did the P3 itself make that happen? No, but what the P3 did is it created a vehicle by which the city could get it all done in a timely manner, in an efficient manner, and in a coordinated manner that enabled them to generate revenue for their project and make it affordable and achieve these housing and economic development goals. And that's really the power of the P3 and being able to work with a developer in that way. Couple other benefits that they can offer is, you know, you're gaining economies of scale, right? If you just went and built one asset versus asking a developer to build 3 assets, you get economies in scale in the construction and the design potentially. You also get it in terms of staffing for O&M. If you've got half an FTE to manage something, that's more difficult to swallow than if you need 3 FTEs to manage a bundle of projects. So you get economies of scale that way. You also get, you know, the process leads to much better planning and placemaking over the life cycle. Because you can set the requirements and work with the developer to make sure the timing and the consistency across all the projects is there. And the developer can help provide additional services across the multiple projects around, you know, mixed-use neighborhood, making sure it's all maintained to a consistent, it conforms to a consistent standard of maintenance, providing public security, et cetera. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's the lecture in a nutshell. I have a couple case studies to talk to you about. This is where we test your knowledge. We're going to talk about 2 projects in Southern California here. One is the Long Beach Civic Center, and the other is the Vermont Corridor Project, LA County project. So this is the test because we have. This is where all the concepts come together, and I'm going to talk a little bit about these case studies. So, next slide, please. So, the Long Beach Civic Center actually had 2 procurement models in one project. The city and the port partnered to get a new port headquarters built, but also a new city hall, main library, Lincoln Park, it's about a 5-acre urban downtown park, and all the associated infrastructure with that. Huge plaza, pedestrian, paseo, all connected to transit. But the port has a huge balance sheet, and they do a lot of bond financing on their own. So they said, well, and they have a lot of professional staff that maintain tons of facilities. So they said, you know, we're not interested in the life cycle. We're interested in the first cost, the construction cost. So we're going to do a design build finance. The city said, well, we're terrible at maintaining assets, so we want the DBFOM because we don't want to have this. We don't want to have this another City Hall story 40 years from now. We got to replace it yet again. So the city was motivated to have a DBFOM, and they worked together to enact effectively two types of procurement in one project, and there was some brain damage involved there. But the outcome here was that, or the principles that we used in the project was that, you know, the Plenary Properties created an LLC to manage the project. They were the developer. They brought in the whole team of the design build contractor. They brought in the FM provider. They negotiated with the lenders, and they brought some of their own equity, and they put the project together. They also took responsibility for either developing themselves or selling the land assets to developers that could build the housing. When they built the public asset, there was no transfer of property rights, right? So for the public assets, the city and the port still maintained and owned, or excuse me, still owned the land. The private development parcels, the city elected to sell, not lease, and that was their preference. But you can do either. And those land sales, as I said, brought revenue into the project, the public project. Plenary was the equity interest that managed the whole project and ran the LLC, the development LLC. And the lender's security, right? So what the security interest in this project was effectively the contract that the developer had, right? And the credit of the city. And so when they looked at those two things, they said, okay, this has a high credit project. So they gave very favorable taxable financing to the project. And finally, this is an availability payment. So that means the city pays the developer for the availability of the assets that they built. So this, again, City Hall, main library, et cetera. Let's go to the next slide. So what did this project actually look like? It's about 600,000 square feet of public buildings. And then there was another 5-acre Lincoln Park. And there was a big Civic Plaza that went with that. It's a total project cost of about $520 million. The amount of equity needed for this project to create the right risk transfer and also to satisfy the lenders that there be proper oversight was about 9% of that cost. So, the role of equity is important, and it costs more than debt. But the key is that you're actually getting value for that additional cost. And working with the lenders and the city, we found a ratio of a little less than 90-10, which was a very efficient financing. Not a lot of equity in this project. There were two separate financings, as I said. So the port, this was for the city project, they used taxable debt. So they went to the private market and they went to different investors, and they ended up selling all the bonds to one investor, which was a reinsurer, who wanted this type of municipal project in their portfolio, and felt that the project was well conceived, and so they basically provided all of the taxable debt for the city project. The port project, as I said, they just said, we want turnkey construction and hand me the keys to the building and then we'll take care of the O&M. So the port actually, the developer secured a construction loan for the port headquarters building at a very favorable interest rate, and then the port paid down that entire amount at the end of construction with a bond issuance. That they're in the market all the time, so that's how they did that. And as I said, there was a significant land sale that helped fund the public projects. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, this was dubbed a hybrid P3, or it created an asset class or a delivery model called hybrid P3, and that was because of all of the private development. So when the P3 contract was signed at the beginning of the construction period, the city sold one parcel, and that immediately got built for housing, and that brought some money in for the city. The rest of the public assets were built. And at the end of that, the land where the city hall stood became private development land, because they had to basically stay in their building until they could move into the new one. So once they moved in, the city hall got taken down and now is being built as the second larger private development site that's putting up 580 units of housing downtown. The private development was supposed to be developed as soon as they moved, but because of the pandemic, there was about a 2-year delay in all of that, and that was a risk that the city took in wanting the developer to not be able to develop that land and have development rights transfer until they knew they had beneficial occupancy of the public buildings. Importantly, this project was conceived as a mixed-use district. And so it was always thought that when the city and the port moved into their new buildings, that the old lands that the old facilities were on would be some form of private development. What exactly was unknown, but it did have affordable housing requirements. The end result, however, I think is great, because they were able to build a lot of middle-income housing in a city like most California cities is really struggling to find a way of building housing at scale to address housing issues. And they were able to do that in this project, and we'll see how that last piece of the development goes, which is starting construction now. Last case study, and we will wrap up. So this second case study is from the Vermont corridor, is a project that was used by LA County to build mental health offices for the county. This was a case study where they really liked the benefits of a DBFOM, but they just couldn't stomach a couple of aspects of that. One was the cost of capital was too beneficial. They wanted tax exempt financing. They felt they could get a much better deal. So they used what's called a 6320 structure that basically enables a nonprofit to raise financing and create a project for a public entity that is that nonprofit set up basically to do that work for a public entity. So it is a way of creating an arm's length transaction that's not debt to the city, but it's still accessing the tax exempt markets, and you're still maintaining a level of risk transfer to an entity that's set up to deliver this. There are important differences, but in effect, this is an example where DBFOM was desired, but tax exempt debt was too great a benefit to pass it up. The other was that the county wasn't sure about locking in their O&M costs long term. As I said, you do have to make that commitment if you're doing the full DBFOM, and the county didn't want to do that. So this project was effectively a 100% tax exempt deal, bonds issued by the nonprofit. The nonprofit hired the design builder, which was Tremel Crow, and they worked with a design team and the county in a progressive fashion. Have you ever heard of the term progressive design build? It's effectively rather than taking design to a certain point and then having a contractor price it, you do that initial design with the contractor and you go through these progressive milestones and updates to a price until you agree on a final price at a certain point. So you'll hear the term design build and you'll hear the term progressive design build. They're similar, but progressive means there's more upfront collaborative involvement before the final turnkey fixed price. Couple of important points here, since you guys are now DBFOM experts. I want to point out a few differences. One is that the title of this project is held by the nonprofit. So technically, the county doesn't own it anymore. The title sits in the nonprofit, and the bonds are secured with a first mortgage to benefit the bondholders. There's also two separate contracts. There's not one P3 contract. You have a design build finance contract that Tremel Crow, delivered and used their balance sheet and their guarantees to make that happen. But then the O&M are shorter term O&M contracts that the nonprofit's going to have to secure on behalf of the county to maintain this facility that the county is effectively renting from the nonprofit. Now, the county is not totally divorced of this project either. There are certain rules that 6320s require, like at any time the county could defease the bonds with other money and take the building over. You could also have a situation where the nonprofit does default and the lenders need it to be rented to somebody, and the county says, I don't know. They would have to rent that building to somebody else because they hold title and the bonds, they sold the bonds in the market, not the county. So it's an interesting animal in that it enables some of the risk transfer, but it relies more on the mechanics of property and rent and leases than it does the DBFOM, which is really more about, think of it more like a service contract. The last interesting point here is that while the county did choose shorter term O&M contracts, that was the preference of the county, but under 6320s you can do up to a 30-year O&M contract legally. So you can ask an O&M provider to come in and provide more of that life cycle experience and funding of replacement and handling more of that life cycle cost. This next slide. Oh, you were on that slide. I'm sorry. Stay there for a second. So this was also a pretty large project. It's about $350 million first project cost. It's mostly offices, however, and a lot of parking. The big benefit here was that the county didn't have to use their own debt because they had concerns about debt capacity, preserving it for other projects. They also were able to save quite a bit of money in the O&M and the amount of financing they saved versus a project financing. They got very favorable terms on the bonds, and they have a single entity in the nonprofit that they can go to for any concerns regarding the construction and the ongoing facility condition. However, that nonprofit doesn't necessarily have the same incentives as, say, like an equity investor who has real money and skin in the game. The nonprofit is more of a management company. But also a very successful project. I think the LA County has been very happy with this project and intends to use this model in other projects going forward. Okay, that pretty much concludes our presentation. As a quick reminder, these are, I've gone through a lot of these benefits of P3s. Obviously, the devil's in the details, but when you're thinking about future projects, right, these are some of the key benefits that you should be thinking about and asking about: of risk transfer, optimizing costs across the life cycle, getting the benefit of performance-based contracting. We talked a little bit about that. The use of private financing to incentivize parties and manage your risk, and getting the benefit of lenders and equity to take care of projects for you. And finally, using P3s as a vehicle for catalytic projects to bring in a lot more private development in projects. So hopefully this gives you some basis for, upcoming presentation in September about the Burbank Civic Center project, and happy to pass this back over to Elizabeth or take questions. Thank you.
Yes, so that completes the presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions you have.
Great, thank you very much for the presentation. We are experts now, right? There was one of the slides that you mentioned in regards where you showed us a pie chart. One of the, that would be, well, there's no pages and there's no reference to it. It's under asset preservation risk.
Yep.
And there's 4 items in the pie chart.
Slide 17, okay.
Okay. We'll go with that. And you mentioned the life cycle. So that in essence is a state of good repair, right? That would cover that?
Yeah, it is a fund that you slowly fill and use and fill and use over the term to maintain a state of good repair. That's right.
Because that's something we really haven't done. And, I'm talking about past council members and past councils. We've never really focused on something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that myself, early on, I would vote for something. Yeah, let's do it. It sounds good. Just like when you vote something on the ballot box, park stuff. Yeah, I'm all for parks. Let's do it. How can that be bad? But the question never has come up: how are you going to pay for it after the one-time funding runs out?
Right.
Or moving forward.
Right.
And we'll deal with that in 40 years when it's time to either replace it or repair it along the way, kind of Band-Aid along the way. So the state of good repair is an excellent way of doing business, moving forward, and having something there build up year after year after year, so you can have some funding source. You don't have to say, now what are we going to do? How are we going to raise the funds to fix the library that's been there for all those years, right? It had a couple of floods because of the fact that the sprinkler system broke down. It's just things that happen over the years.
Yeah.
But at least you'll have some kind of funding, or at least some source of funding to help alleviate some of those concerns. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But anyway, I appreciate you bringing that up. I find this very interesting, moving forward. I've discussed P3s for several years now, because it's been brought to my attention, and when I go to conferences, things like that, P3s are brought up. It's a good way of funding, as long as you get all the right pieces together and the right characters to do the right jobs.
That's right.
But anyway, any colleagues, any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I just wanted to say I think we have a couple college students and a high school student here in the room with us, and I feel like I just got out a lecture. Very, very good job, sir. Don't hit me with a pop quiz, but rarely do I not have questions. Although, Ms. Goldman, I am going to have some questions on September 13th when we talk about the more specific project. But I do have one, sir, and I don't mean to be tongue-in-cheek about this whatsoever. Looking at the staff report, looking at the presentation, you lay out all of the many benefits of P3 financing and several success stories. And quite frankly, I'm convinced it's certainly a good model. But in fairness, there are pitfalls to P3 financing or trade-offs. Could you cover those so the public can hear about that?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, first of all, not all P3s survive into, construction and operation. There are challenges with, they're typically used on major projects, and major projects are fraught with the development process, changes in, changes of opinion. So there's what the industry calls political risk. So a lot of times P3s can be complex, and people can kind of lose the plot, right? What are we trying to do here? And you can get people that don't, the complexity frightens them, right? Even if it's creating value, if it's hard to understand, then it's harder to convince people. So that's kind of point number one, before it even becomes a project. This model's been around a long time outside of the U.S., right? A lot of countries don't have the strong capital markets that we have that provide cheap capital. And so a lot more infrastructure is built using project finance. The United Kingdom is a great example. In fact, I think this model comes from that originally. There have been a lot of discussions as they have come to the end of a 30, 40-year period of using P3s for a variety of types of assets. And in the UK, the feelings are mixed about whether P3s have delivered the value they said they would. It's highly political where those papers are coming from and who's saying what, because everyone's jockeying for power. But in the round, I think there's a lot of evidence that says that P3s can provide a lot of value, but a lot of it lies in how well you manage that contract, right? You can write the best contract in the world, but if you don't actually use the contract to manage what it is you're trying to attain, it can slip through your fingers. So a really important part is not just getting the contract, but getting through the construction period and training staff and training anybody that needs to use that contract, how to use it, and making sure that it's understood so that you can attain that benefit. So that would probably be point number two. In the UK, the big hubbub is about handback and whether projects are getting handed back with that preserved asset value or not, and who measured it and when did it get measured, and there's a lot of discussion about that. The UK Treasury has a lot of information on the statistics of they call it the Project Finance Initiative, PFI, if anyone's interested. It's great late night reading. P3s are also set up to deal with the downside scenarios, right? In most cases, you're not writing P3s because you're entering into P3s because risk is going to occur. You're doing it because it might occur. And that is an area where, depending on your opinion about P3s, you would say they fail, or you would say that P3s did their job. And I'll give you an example. State Route 91 in San Diego, toll road, went bankrupt. Okay, you can do a lot of research on that project and talk to Sandag about their experience. At the end of the day, the developer took a massive haircut and went into bankruptcy. Sandag took over that project and basically got the project at, I'm going to use a turn of phrase, at 10 cents on the dollar. I don't actually know what the price was paid for that. And that was because the developer was on the front line having to manage a revenue toll project and got it wrong. And there was a lot of finger pointing about why it happened and why the revenue wasn't there and why people were using the road or not using the road, and that's not for me to say. But depending on how you look at that project, you could say that's a failed P3. They did a deal and they went bankrupt. And if you're the public interest, you might say, well, we got the benefit of the toll road and now it's our road, and we wish that hadn't happened the way it did, but it wasn't the public out there spending the money and then losing it all. That was a risk that the private sector wanted to take in partnership with the county. So, it's a lot of the devils are in the details. All projects can have challenges, and the P3 model is you're going to get out of it what you put into it, like a lot of the models that I'm talking about. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Councilmember Springer?
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm wondering, with the complexity of it, who sits down and negotiates this? Okay, it's going to be a land lease. All the details, is that you? Or does somebody, because we have not done this before, so does somebody sit down with us?
Yeah,
To
so
negotiate
someone like me
everything.
would support the staff you see in this room, the city attorney, the community development director, the public works director, Elizabeth as the library director in a major project, for example. You would have, you wear a lot of hats as a public owner in these projects. You are the sponsor. You're also the regulator. So there's some stuff you got to manage there. But in negotiating the projects, it's financial, technical, and legal consultants supporting staff who are leading the negotiations.
Okay, and so I just have some questions here. They don't have to be answered tonight. I'm just putting them out there because maybe they're appropriate to answer at the next meeting or by the next meeting.
Perfect.
Okay, but they're questions that came up for me.
Okay.
So is the central library a part of this? The existing central library? And it was built in 1963, and I've told Ms. Goldman this, but it would be really nice, whether one likes it or not, to save a portion of the facade. Is it possible to do a project so there are some for sale units? Is it possible for Burbank Housing Corp to participate in some way? Can we do a LEED Platinum? Can we do it so that it's a self-sustained project in terms of energy and water? So that water is recycled on site? And is there a design that extends or maximizes the economic life of a building so that at the end of 30 or 40 years, it is some value? And if it's negotiated, that it reverts to us, that it does have some value for us. And the city council has 7 goals, and I won't go through all of them. Anybody can give them to you. But for example, quality of life. You mentioned placemaking, and so that's what causes me to think about them. But we do have a quality of life goal, to include neighborhood protection. In this case, it would be like neighborhood building. So as we do this, and can we please keep those in mind? There are 7 of them. And, even in my comment about LEED Platinum and being fully self-contained, we have renewable energy goals, and we have a greenhouse gas reduction plan. So can we please do this, structure it, set it up, design it, so that it's consistent with our goals? And I think if we could do some ownership, and I don't know if that's possible with the way that it's being set up, but that would be a really good thing. So it gives some residents, maybe not all ownership, a chance to, at some point, really manage their housing costs and to build wealth. Because in the housing bills that are coming out of Sacramento, we have no say in that. And we could, in this situation, do that. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Let me just make a point here. Recommendations to note and file. You're not asking for any direction from council, the entire council.
That's correct. And definitely, Councilmember Springer, I just want to say that what you covered will very much be addressed on September 13th.
Perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
If
Councilmember
there's anything else anyone specifically wants to call out that they want to make sure we address on September 13th, we're happy to make some notes about that and be sure it's included.
Councilmember Frutos, go ahead.
My only question would be, under the bankruptcy, specifically for this one here, housing with the library, say the market crashes or whatever developer goes bankrupt, how much or the legality is the taxpayer going to be responsible for this? Because that to me is a big concern. Is I get what you're saying, but Councilmember Schultz brought up a good point. You know, the dark side, and you're talking about the European, and you got me thinking. So my only question, it doesn't have to be answered tonight.
Okay.
It could come back on the 13th, but to move forward with this, you know, I'm looking at the asset lifespan of 40 plus years. But, you know, the real estate market in Burbank is always going up. I mean, an average home, today, the city manager gave a report, it's 1.3 million. So looking at this downtown property, the Civic Center, moving the project forward, God forbid, you know, market tanks, we go through another pandemic and everything gets shut down again. My only question watching the taxpayers' dollars is, how much on the hook are we going to be responsible for if this goes belly up? And listening to what happened in San Diego, I'm looking at, well, wait a minute, this here is more for housing, it's a library, so there's not that much revenue except for the rental of the units. How much is the taxpayer, or in this case the city, the corporation, going to be on the hook if this goes belly up? And you don't have to answer it now. It's a sensitive question, and I want to know the facts. So if there's time to research it, I would really like to know, you know, using today's numbers in that 40 plus year span, the goes bankrupt, there's another pandemic, we shut down. I like to know maybe by the 13th, give you some time to follow up, but the numbers is what I'm really kind of interested in, what would happen to the city of Burbank and our financial responsibility now.
Yeah, let's come back on the 13th, because your question, I think, is really rooted in the project. I can answer in principle that the P3 contracts deal very directly with bankruptcy and what happens and what protections the developer has and or the city or municipality has. And there are many reasons for bankruptcy, right? In some cases, it's, you know, lack of revenue. In an availability payment project like like in Long Beach Civic Center, it's really the credit of the city willing to make a payment for the project. So the revenue risk, the bankruptcy in terms of revenue risk is really related to the city's ability to make payments, which could happen, right? Like if sales tax tank or something like that happens. Very unlikely in the credit analysis that you need for a project would look at that in the history of the municipality's ability to pay and how it manages its debt, that kind of thing. Bankruptcy for other reasons like the failure of the parent company somewhere, right? That's partly why you have a project-specific LLC that exists for the purpose of the project. So if something like that happens, it doesn't necessarily take the project down. So that's another bankruptcy scenario that the P3 contract deals with. So in principle, yes, that question is, there's a very specific answer to it depending on how the contract is written. In the case of the project, I think we can come back to you with, you know, what's the difference between what happens to the public assets versus what happens to the housing, because those are actually two different components with different structures behind them.
And we're another point to hopefully help when you come back on the 13th is I'll use the real scenario of our mall. So our mall went from a Texas-based ownership Then we had the pandemic for about a year. And then they were looking for somebody to buy the note. And the mall is in limbo of who's going to pick up the note. Are they going to go bankrupt? And that kind of, after Councilman Schultz brought that point up, now it's got me really thinking. So, who's going to pick up that note from the, the developer standpoint? I mean, I'll wait till the 13th, but I just wanted to kind of where my question was coming from.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, understood. Thank you.
I've got a question in regards to, we're talking a lot about financing. Has our finance director or finance department and the city treasurer been involved in these discussions? I know it's early on, but have they been at all
Yes.
included?
Yes.
Both,
The city treasurer has not been involved to this point, but certainly Ms. Becker has been very involved, and she apologizes she's ill and was not able to be here tonight. But she said I could let you know that she's supportive of this model because it places the debt burden on the developer instead of the city. And she absolutely plans to evaluate any and all financing options to ensure the city's getting the best terms and interest rates available to us.
okay, at what point do you intend to involve the city treasurer?
I think it depends, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it depends a little bit on whether, if we're not issuing the financing and it doesn't become a debt burden for the city, I don't believe it should have that much impact.
Okay.
However, we will discuss that more
Sure.
and make sure that we're bringing her in if there is a relevant role for
Okay.
her
Great.
in
Thank-
making sure this protects the city.
Thank you. Councilmember Springer?
Just another question for the 13th is, are we considering any, we own the land under, in both locations, under the library and the future Civic Plaza. Is land going to be considered as a subsidy for any part of those? Because I know that land costs are just so high, and I'm just involved with a few committees right now where they talk about land as a subsidy, and of course that would bring down housing cost a lot. And we have seen that with Burbank Housing Corp. So, thank you.
All right, colleagues, if there's no more questions, the recommendation is noted in file. And apparently we're going to be seeing you again on September 13th. Is that what it is? All right. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, the next report is the review of the 2022 Charter Review Committee recommendations. Mrs. Viviana Garzon, Administrative Analyst in the City Manager's Office, please present the report. Pardon me?
Can we wait for Bob to come back?
Yeah, I think,
I'm just thinking, can't we wait for all the council members to be here for our report?
sure. I think he probably went to the restroom.
I understand, I just.
He'll be back. He'll be back. He won't miss it. What, do you want to take a break? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying, it's just.
Who's running the meeting, by the way? Who's running the meeting?
Proceed, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Talamantes, council members Frutos, Springer, and Schultz. Viviana Garzon, Administrative Analyst in the City Manager's Office. Let me, go ahead, Jonathan. Okay. At the March 15th, 2022 City Council meeting, each council member appointed a representative from the public to serve on the 2022 Charter Review Committee. 4 of the 5 members are with us tonight, and I would like to introduce them before continuing with my presentation. Chair Christopher Rosati,
Welcome.
Vice Chair Gloria Salas,
Welcome.
Committee Member Gavin Cho, and Committee Member Kevin Muldoon. Unfortunately, Committee Member Alejandro Escobar was not able to join us today as he is in Kansas on a work trip. I'd like to give you some background. Go ahead and on the next slide, please. Thank you. I'd like to give you some background of the charter and the charter review process. The City of Burbank's charter is our basic founding document that defines the limitations, functions, organization, and essential procedures on governance of our city. In the past, proposed changes to the charter have been brought about in one of 2 ways, either by the City Council or from a charter review committee. such as the one we have before us today. Any changes to the charter must be placed on a ballot and approved by a majority of registered Burbank voters. Go ahead, Jonathan. Next slide. Section 1400 of the city charter requires that at 5-year intervals, the city council select 5 citizens from the community to form a committee to consider whether the charter requires changes and to recommend those changes. The charter provides 3 conclusions: a full review, a limited review, or no review. Go ahead. The committee met on 6 separate occasions during the springtime. The first 3 meetings were held via video teleconference, and as soon as council determined that it was safe for us to return in person, the following 3 meetings were held in person downstairs in the city attorney's conference room. All the meetings were open to the public and held in accordance with the Ralph M. Brown Act, including the posting of agendas 72 hours in advance of the meetings and a public comment period allowing call-in speakers and in-person speakers. The staff liaisons to the committee were City Attorney Joe McDougall, Assistant City Manager Judy Wilkie, and myself. At the committee's second meeting, Christopher Rosati was selected as the committee's chair, with Gloria Salas serving as the vice chair. Next slide, please. Prior to the first meeting, committee members were given a binder with documents to use as a resource during the review, including Charter of the City of Burbank, which looks like this. I'm sure you all have a copy of it. League of the California Cities Charter Toolkit, the National Civic League Model City Charter, and also a list of previous topics that previous charter review committees had discussed. The charter review process began with each committee member providing staff with a list of topics for discussion. Topics included budget process, the general organization of the city, term limits, capping of election funds, the continuation of the hybrid public comment period, and many more. In total, the list had over 25 topics for discussion. The committee had very healthy dialogues around these topics. In alignment with the purpose of the committee, the question that was raised throughout the discussions was, is a charter amendment necessary for revising or improving a procedure, position, protocol, etc., identified by committee members? The committee engaged in productive discussions that narrowed down the items on the original list of discussion topics. Each member was given the opportunity to ask questions and express their opinions. The discussions gave the committee members a greater understanding of the city's history, organization, functions, and operations. The final step in the review process was for the committee to thoughtfully consider what they would be recommending to council. I would like to welcome Chair of the Charter Review Committee, Mr. Christopher Rosati, to present the 2022 Charter Review Committee recommendations to City Council. Mr. Rosati?
Welcome, Mr. Rosati.
Thank you, Ms. Gorjon, council members, mayor, thank you. My name is Chris Rosati, and I'm the chair of the Charter Review Committee. Our committee members, thank you for your appointments, and Mr. Frutos, thank you for your faith in me and your appointment. I would like to say I've been on a lot of committees, and this was a good one. Not because we agreed, but everyone's willingness to really work hard. We met often, we were diligent, and we debated pretty heavily. After much discussion and experience each of us have in the community and the feedback we received from the community, our recommendation was for a full review of the charter based on 3 named topics. The first topic was term limits for city council members and board and commission members. The second was the addition of social inequity and discrimination clause in the charter. And number 3 was amending the section 1400 of the charter to allow the Charter Citizens Committee to be appointed every 8 years at a minimum, 1 year prior to an election year. So you have our report and Ms. Garzon's report, and we'll let you weigh in and make the correct determinations as you see fit. we thank you for the honor.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank, before we proceed, I want to thank the committee members for putting so much time and energy into this discussion. And like you said, you might have not agreed, but we're coming up to some consensus at least.
I think we had over 25 topics, and we whittled it down to 3 over a very short period of time.
Right.
But we met, again, very often, and some of our meetings were very long. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So Councilmember, is there anything else, Ms. Garzon?
No, Mayor, that's it. Thank you.
Council members, discussion? Councilmember Frutos?
Yeah, I'll start. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chair and members, thank you. Thank you. As you know, I served on 2 charter review committees way before, so I know the in-depth work you guys did, the discussions, the frustrations. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Mr. Mayor, I definitely support term limits, and I'm just going to start. We can take it from there. I think 3 terms is enough. The first term is a learning curve. Second term, you're really getting into the weeds. You're representing the city on different boards and commissions. You're on state or federal, like we all share. And at the end of the third, you should be grooming, hopefully, the next replacement. Sometimes I kind of get disappointed because we've got some really good commissioners, but they got over 20 years. And it doesn't allow more people. So I would like to support the Charter Review Committee on that one point, just one council member for the discussion, to also include the boards and commissions.
Now, was that item number 1, or are we
Yeah,
going?
it's right on top. The
we're
first
going in
one's the
order?
term limits, yeah.
All right.
And just to start the conversation, the discussion, so I want to hear everybody's different opinion. The second one is with regarding to, I do support the social inequity and discrimination clause, but I like to add that any board or commission or even council member should be removed if they discriminate against any individual based on age. Because right now, the way I'm reading it, it clearly is only for the employee. I really believe in the equity, and most important, that if any council member or any commissioner is literally proven, have some type of a review, but if anybody at the elected level or the appointed level discriminates against any individual based on age, race, color, religion, sex, disability, national origin, etc., should be removed, and there should be a process. So I was thinking about that for this meeting. And I do agree, after serving on the charter, I think it's a good idea every 8 years and a non-election year cycle, so it doesn't become a political football during the process. And those are my thoughts. I'm open to see where you guys are thinking, but thank you very much, and I do support the recommendations. I would just like to see accountability for the electeds, not just the employees, but also the electeds and boards and commissions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Frutos. Anyone else?
I'll go, Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember Springer. Councilmember Frutos, first of all, I agree with you. I think that term limits are something I'd like the committee to move forward and explore. I also agree with you that 3 terms, I don't want to direct the committee what to do. You're obviously going to conduct your full review. But 3 terms does make sense to me, because the other thing to keep in mind is that we represent the city of Burbank on regional boards. Most of our neighbors in Glendale, Pasadena, Los Angeles have 3-term limits, and I wouldn't want Burbank to be at an institutional disadvantage by cycling through our council members earlier. Ultimately, that is the work for the committee to review and decide, but that's just one council member's 2 cents. Mr. City Attorney, I agree with Councilmember Frutos about the social inequity and discrimination clause. The only concern I have is, legally speaking, when you talk about removal of elected officials, I know from my background that can be really trepid waters. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, elected officials are placed in office by the voters. So council members don't have the ability to remove each other, colleagues. You, of course, can, and council has over the years, had discussions about the merits of removing a board or commissioner. So there's a proper relationship there for that. And I think the Charter Review Committee may also have additional thoughts about social inequity generally, not simply discrimination, but infusing more policy objectives into the charter. And part of the discussion also included, there are many laws on the books regarding discrimination and fair treatment. So I think that's a matter they would want to discuss more to really flesh out the spirit of that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. With those thoughts in mind, I would also be in agreement of their further study of that issue. I did have a question, I suppose initially for you, Ms. Garzón, or perhaps for Chair Rosati. With regards to amending Section 1400, moving it from 5 years to 8 years, I just wanted to know thus far what was the committee's rationale behind doing that? Or suggesting that, I should say.
Thank you. Welcome back. We reviewed past charter reviews, and it was kind of the same topics have come up over and over and over. There really wasn't a lot of new information, so it just seemed repetitive to go through this every 5 years. So we thought, as Councilmember Frutos said, he's served twice, and I don't think much has come out of those meetings. So maybe 8 years would probably be best. You can always go back if you don't think it's enough, but every 5 years, based on the last 20 years, there really wasn't anything that came out of those meetings.
Thank you, sir. And I had one more question, if I might, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rosati, you might want to stay up here for that. One issue that I know that has come up time and again is the issue of districts for council. And I know that that was something that the committee discussed. Because it wasn't listed in the report and the notes are minimal by their nature, I was wondering if you could just tell me a bit about the committee's conversation about districts.
We talked about districts. We had actually quite a bit of conversation with our city attorney. We felt that Burbank 1 wasn't really that large of a community where we would have districts. And then where would you draw the lines for the districts? Is it Hillside? Is it Magnolia Park? Is it Verdugo Park? Is it the Rancho? Is it Media Center? So we felt that it would be really, really tough to come up with that. And then ultimately, I think we don't want one council person. I'm going to say all of us, but if I'm wrong, just let me know. We think that we should elect people that represent all of us, not a district. And there shouldn't be, in LA, they trade favors so they can get certain things in their district. We want a council that we elect to represent all of the community, not the Rancho, not the Hillside. I want to know, excuse me, this mask is bothering me. I want to know that Bob is working just as hard for me in the Rancho as he is for Magnolia Park or the Hillside. And same thing with our mayor. So, Mr. Frutos. So I think that's kind of what our rationale was. Yes. So that's kind of, in answer to your question, we want a council that represents all of us, not a district.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate the answer.
And on that topic, if I may weigh in.
And I've been saying that for years.
Yes.
I don't represent a neighborhood, a district.
Yes, you have.
I represent the entire city of Burbank.
Yes, you have.
In 2004, when I was there, we did a major, we discussed the same thing. Like the chair said, it just comes back again. And then in 2010, when I was appointed on behalf of Dr. Gordon, same discussion. And in my charter review committees, if I remember right, the biggest thing is that we really just looked at LA. And we looked at our form of government, we looked at the size of the city, and the chair is right. The people of Burbank have always wanted councilmen. Just look where we live. You're in the Rancho. Jess is in the middle of the hillside. Sharon's on the southern side, and I'm by the airport. So, we're pretty much across the city right now today represented. And then when Will Rogers was here, he was the second guy by the airport next to me. So, it's been discussed before.
Yeah.
And it just seems that for the size of our city, an at-large government holding us accountable for every part of the city is the best form of government. And you can see us and then look at LA and their districts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We also have to realize and understand that there's an organization or several that are going from city to city, imposing those district obligations on each
Yes.
city.
Yes.
So-
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I could offer a brief comment on that point, and so that goes to the matter of fair representation under the California Voter Rights Act. And those actions are brought as lawsuits to challenge whether the voting system fairly represents underrepresented groups and whether those groups' votes are being diluted. And so it's a very specific kind of demographic. It doesn't simply relate to racial aspects. It certainly goes to geographic aspects. It goes to the issues that Chairman Rosati mentioned about geographical representation, but also gender, and also both Frutos and Rosati as Latino representatives of the community and on the council. Also former council member and mayor Marcia Ramos, but then we've also had many women also on council. So I think while the threats do come up, I think there's certainly a sense of fair representation. It's not to say someone couldn't bring a lawsuit, but that's the other aspect, is whether there seems to be a dilution of particular groups' power to elect people that they feel are representative. And I don't think there was any sense of that came out of the deliberations. It doesn't mean there wouldn't necessarily be a legal challenge, but I think many of the aspects that the council has discussed bear on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just one final question, if I might, if appropriate. I just wanted to thank all of the committee members for their service and just ask if there were any additional comments that any of them had for the council while we're here.
Can we wait that?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. We can wait.
It's a little bit presumptuous since we have two council members to weigh in still.
Sure.
Yeah, you know what, Gloria, is that okay with you? We'll save that to the end,
Okay,
to close.
sounds good.
Okay, I think
Well,
that's,
it was on the topic you just were discussing.
go ahead.
Just very quickly, and I don't know if anyone here is even old enough to remember, back in the mid-'80s, late '80s, there were a group of community members who came and approached council with districts, and one of them actually drew the districts and how they would divide the city. So I'm sure it's somewhere in the records, but at that time, that city council voted against it. So that's just a little bit of historical information.
And when it comes to drawing the district lines, nobody's going to be happy. There's going to be yes, and other people, no, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. Councilmember Springer?
Thank you for your service on this committee, and thank you for the presentation. So I have a comment about the social inequity and discrimination clauses. And Mr. McDougall, you said that there are laws on the books. So though discrimination, it's taken care of, is it not?
Yes, but I think the committee's sense was more, the flavor of the discussion had more to do with diversity, inclusiveness, because I brought up the Unruh Civil Rights Act and several different statutes, but I think the committee really wanted to look more broadly. They see the charter as a governing document, and so it sits here as a recommendation because there wasn't finite language to recommend to the council, but I think they still felt there was more work to do on the subject, not simply what's legal in the civil code, what's in the city's anti-discrimination policy, but really looking more at some of the work that the council has now set in place about diversity and inclusiveness.
Oh, okay. So maybe a clause like that, just to proactively make sure that we have a diverse workforce. Something like that maybe could be included. And I feel like just in my experience with the city from about 2005, I see it seems to me like the workforce and our boards and commission have gotten more diverse. But on that note, I am a liaison to the Advisory Council on Disabilities, and they lament that there are no people in wheelchairs who work for the city. And if they feel like they're being left behind in terms of inclusivity. So is there a way to include them more, like in employment and in everything in the city? And I know we have a commitment on our legislative platform to universal design, so our city is accessible to everybody regardless of ability or disability. But
So I can say, because I've been doing a lot of recruiting for my own department in this last year, the screening is blind. And so, I suppose part of it depends upon the availability of people to apply. And I can say, for one, I haven't seen candidates in particular that represented those groups. So the recruitment process is set up that way. And so you can always set a policy, and the city does have a policy and has an anti-discrimination policy and blind screening, so that we don't get applicants, we get applicants after they've gone through HR. So you can set up a policy. Whether you see the candidates or not is then, of course, going to also depend upon the market as well.
I just wanted to add too, Councilmember Springer, that we do have a lot of employees with disabilities that are hired for the city. Now, they may not be obvious disabilities like a wheelchair that you mentioned, but I do want to make it clear that we have a lot of employees who have disabilities.
okay, I will take that information back to them at the next meeting.
It's a really good point that I wouldn't know because it's not relevant to the screening process.
Right.
So that's a good point. Thank you.
And I support a 3-term limit on city council and on boards and commissions, just as long as we help the board and commission member move to, well, they know another board or commission is available to them, to keep them fresh and us fresh. And I think those are my comments.
Thank you. Now I'll weigh in. I agree. I agree with all the 3 recommendations, but I'd like to give a little more thought to term limits. There's some cities, and you'll look into this as we discuss it. There's some cities that allow 3 terms, take 2 years off, and you can come back. So there's options. It's not just a dead 3-term limit, because I know there's several cities in the Southern California area that do that. Whether it's good or bad, it'll be the decision you guys will be discussing to come forward to the council for recommendations. The same thing for boards and commissions. And I blame council members like myself over the years for appointing boards and commission members term after term after term. So it's not the applicant themselves that's at fault, it's the appointing body that's up here that have done that year after year, right, Mr. Frutos? I mean, we're guilty of that. But nonetheless, so having a 3-year term, a 3-term limit on a board, there's pros and cons to that. I don't know if you did discuss the pros. Go ahead, Mr. Rossetti.
Indulge me just for a moment. We're making the recommendation for you to make that decision. We're leaving the door open if you want 3 years, 2 years off and come back. But we just said there should be term limits, but we're leaving it up to you guys to how many years, and if you want to open the door for that person to come back, same with the boards and commissions. So we left that open.
All right. So you're asking for tonight to make those decisions?
No. We'll if the committee's going to do, I'll just add that ultimately it is your decision, right? I mean, ultimately
sure.
it is the
It'll come
council's
back.
decision,
Right.
regardless.
Well, ultimately, it's the voters.
So, I mean, it's ultimately the council's decision what would
put
go
it
on the ballot. I mean,
Right.
that's the bottom line. And then it's the decision of the voters if they agree or not, right? But what I think the plan is that if you agree, and it's looking that way, for them to do a more further review, they'll come back with a recommendation to you about, and it could be options, you know, you could do
Yeah,
this,
it could
you
be
could do
two or
that.
three options.
Right.
I'd rather see that.
Correct. So,
for
but they'll
the
come
council
back
to-
based on research from what they have found from other cities, you know, what they believe, what they've heard tonight, you know, what they hear from the community, those types of things. So they'll come back with some form of a recommendation, but ultimately it is at the end of the day, the council's decision to
What we put
determine
forward
what
to put on the
eventually
ballot.
gets put on the
Right.
ballot.
The social inequity and discrimination clauses, so those, what's quoted in the report, that's for employees only? The charter deals not only for employees, right? I mean, it's citywide. Doesn't it cover the residents as well, the people that live in the city of Burbank? Or is it just specific to city employees?
So the charter, so the review committee
Right.
has a desire to infuse some policy into the charter. From my view, as a city attorney, the charter is the structure of government. The California Constitution gives the cities the ability to form a charter city and to, this is arguable, retain as much local control as possible
Right.
and have control over the general laws in the state. Okay. And so the charter is a framework. It sets up the offices, it sets up the council, it sets up the structure and review cycle of the charter. It is not enforceable by ordinance. You know, there's not a misdemeanor, there's nothing in here that's punishable as a misdemeanor. It doesn't set forth penal laws in the way that the state codes and our municipal code is enforceable by infractions and misdemeanors. So there's a different structure to them. That said, there's nothing that says the charter can't have aspirational language about diversity and inclusiveness. So that was a discussion that we had. I believe the committee members would like to work on some language that they think would be appropriate for the charter. And I would naturally view it differently as an attorney, whether it was necessary as the structure for the city, but it doesn't mean it can't be in there. So yes, there are laws that give rise to civil litigation for failure to, well, for discrimination and failure to hire based upon, you know, prohibited characteristics. And there is a policy that the city adopts for all employees that's grounds for discipline
Right.
for engaging in certain behavior. But that's different than really the spirit of diversity and inclusiveness that I think the committee members would like to explore a little bit more.
Okay. So in essence, by putting something in the charter, did the committee feel there's more weight for the charter? Does it give it more credence?
I don't want to speak for the committee, but I would think that based on our conversations, it's more of the values of us as a community.
Okay, that's fine.
And
Yeah.
what we believe in and what we value and what we believe is important to us as a community. And I think that's really what it was more about.
Sounds good. I'm all on board having the committee looking at it and come up with some wording that the city attorney feels more comfortable with. As far as the charter review, 8 years, I mean, we can always change it. Yeah, 5 years might be too soon, as obviously it's already been mentioned by Councilmember Frutos. He served on it twice, so maybe 8 years is a good time. You know, going back to the term limits, there's a lot of good people that are serving our boards and commissions, right? So now we give them 3 terms as limits. That we still have to leave it open for them to maybe go to another board or take a break for 2 years and come back and reapply. Or, I mean, there's got to be discussions. It just can't be just 3 terms and you're out.
I think that will absolutely be a part of the
Okay.
discussion, and I think that's why having a more further review of this will give opportunity for other boards and commission members to weigh in, community members
Sure.
to weigh in, and to come back with some thoughts on, and to see what other cities do, because obviously other cities have boards and commissions as well, and to see how they've, done that. But I know it's, having worked here for over 30 years, I know how important it is to a lot of our commission members to say that they had a 40-year PIN or, something that they value, that they treasure their service to this community. So I think that is absolutely something that the committee will
Okay.
have to take into consideration in terms of, what that might look like in the future. But I think it's, the spirit of that conversation is about ensuring that it's, to your point, Mayor Talamantes, it's not always the incumbent that always gets appointed
Right,
to it.
right.
Because if that keeps happening, then nobody else has an opportunity to participate, right? So maybe by virtue of forcing somebody out of a certain place, that may or may not mean that they could go to another board or a commission, or that may mean they take a break and they come back, or however that looks. But I think it's really more about not trying to discourage, but to really encourage people to want to participate, giving more opportunity, but not discouraging people also from having long-term service and fellowship in their community.
And we've seen that over the last few years. There's a lot of applicants for the different boards and commissions. It's unfortunate, like we say, and whoever the mayor is up here, please keep applying if you didn't get appointed. There's always openings, and any board or commission that you're interested in, please apply. But go ahead, Councilmember Frutos.
Going back to the term limits for the boards and commissions, I'll restate my support for the term limits. What I meant to say, and I apologize if I said it wrong, is we have Commissioner A on the tree hugging committee. I don't want to pick on any specific board or commission. And they've been there for 3 terms. They can apply for another different board or commission. I just don't want them on the tree hugging commission for more than 3 terms, because I want to open it up for other folks, and it keeps fresh blood, fresh perspectives coming in. But that commissioner that already has been there for 3 terms, he knows or she knows that, the next time I got to start thinking about maybe the planning board or maybe the Fire Code of Appeals Commission. That's what I want. I don't want the commissioners to have to take 2 years off. I don't think that's fair to them. But the policy or in the charter should be, hey, I'm coming up to the end of my 3rd term, then let me start thinking about a different board or commission, and let me apply for that one. That's what I meant, Mr.
Sure.
Mayor.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. And I know the committee members get that and staff. Yes, Councilmember Springer?
Right. I feel like, they're done a good service for Burbank, and somebody from the Sustainable Burbank Commission can move easily to like transportation where it's related, or to BWP, and share the knowledge that they got, or somebody can move from transportation to sustainability. So we just need to help them do that and encourage them to do that.
Okay, good. Any other comments? Go ahead. Yes.
The only other comment I would have, Mr. Mayor, is that if this were a business, I think there's a lot of value in having cross-training. You have better efficiencies, better synergies. So I agree with the concept of, hey, if you've done 12 years on transportation, maybe you want to take some of that experience over to Sustainable Burbank, or vice versa, or something entirely different. So I think there's a lot of value there.
But that'll be up to the appointing body.
Yes.
To decide that.
Right.
You're not going to be going from the transportation after 3 terms and automatically go over here.
That's right. That's right.
The body has to decide
Of
3 votes, right?
Of course.
Okay, so I just don't want to make a misstatement that you've got it.
No. Yeah, that was my point. Was I think the intent is really clear that the term limit would apply to the position that you're holding. For example, former Mayor Gable Luddy, after leaving office, went to the airport authority, and I think it's our intent that wouldn't be prohibited, under this change. So yeah, we're in agreement.
I believe Councilmember Schultz mentioned early on, if any of the committee members wanted to state anything. Yes. Kind of your experience on the committee and.
Well, we had a great experience. I want to thank all our liaisons. They were really informative, and we learned a lot and got a big education. One of the things we kept hitting our head against is some of our ideas and thoughts were actually could be covered in code or an ordinance. They weren't really a charter perspective. So there were some things we wanted to bring into the conversation, but it was like, well, that can be handled by a code, that can be handled by an ordinance. So there were like, and then we also talked about ranked voting, but we found out through our education that because our elections are handled by the county, they're not set up for ranked voting, which is something that Ms. Mullen said is a trend in communities to incorporate ranked voting. So there were several other things that we did behind the scenes that weren't represented in some of the body of the work we did. We really wanted to continue the oral communications hybrid model. You know, most communities have video conferencing for oral communications and that. So there were a couple of things, and I'll reach out to you guys privately through email after this is done and let you know some of those things that we were kind of led to believe should be better handled by the council through a code or an ordinance thing. That's my only other thoughts, was because those 25 things got whittled down to 3 because a lot of them were already covered in other jurisdictions of the city. So that was my only.
Mr. Muldoon, can you introduce yourself, please?
Kevin Muldoon,
Thank
citizen
you.
of Burbank.
Thank you.
I also just want to take
Introduce yourself.
Yes, sorry. My name is Gavin. I'm a member of this committee. I want to thank Councilmember Schultz for his trust in me, for being part of this committee. This has been a great experience to learn more about the city of Burbank, but then also to bring sort of a newer, fresher perspective to some of these things, especially something as relevant as the city charter. I don't have anything of real substance to add. I just want to thank the staff that was with us through this process, and then for also the members of the committee for engaging in some really fruitful discussion. And I look forward to hopefully seeing some of these changes implemented to move Burbank into a more sustainable and brighter future. So thank you all.
The real substance that you brought to it was participating in the committee. Thank you.
Gloria Salas, and I will also reiterate, I do want to thank Councilwoman Sharon Springer for choosing me. But this experience was a little bit different from 5 years ago when I was on the committee, simply because I think this one, with City Attorney McDougall and Assistant City Manager Judy, they allowed us more participation, and there was a lot more give and take and a lot more discussion. At least that's how I feel, that we had, it just seemed that they were more open to listening and allowing us to keep going. And I also want to give kudos to Viviana Garzon, because she was always there. She knew what we had discussed previously and was keeping us on track. And so it was I think it was a much more enlightening experience than it was 5 years ago. And it's due to city staff and how they led us through this. So thank you again.
Great. Thank you for your service. Mr. Chair, any closing comments?
Other than a big thank you, and I think all of us worked well together. Again, we did not agree. We did a lot of arguing and debating, but I think it was healthy to work through that. And Mr. McDougall and our Assistant City Manager helped us work through those issues to bring you the presentation tonight.
Great.
So thank you again.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Once again, thank you to the committee for taking the time and effort and energy to do this for us, for the community, and bringing the recommendation forward. So what's the, yes, Councilmember Schultz?
I think I'll have this right, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
So I move the following. Number 1, that we note and file the Charter Review Committee recommendation letter. Number 2, that we I guess it'd be a reappoint all of the existing committee members to conduct a full review of the charter, and 3, that review of the charter be on those 3 items outlined in the recommendation letter.
One point of clarification, are all the committee members willing to serve, continue?
That was our understanding when we talked about it, and that was why they were, willing to have us ask you to consider that.
Okay, Councilmember Frutos, second, excellent. Any further discussion?
No.
All right.
This is good stuff.
Madam City Clerk?
Councilmember Schultz?
Yes.
Councilmember Frutos?
Yes.
Councilmember Springer?
Yes.
And Mayor Talamantes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, thank you very much, committee.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Before we move on to the next agenda, number 4, this relates to number 4, if I may have the mic real quick.
Well, I was going to make a motion on number 4 before
Oh, well, go ahead.
before
Then
we start
I'll
the
yield.
conversation.
You're the mayor, I'll yield to see where you go
Before
with
we
this.
start the conversation, I was going to ask my colleagues if we can go ahead and put this off until Vice Mayor is back. So this is a very important appointment. All our boards and commissions are very important, but this one in particular, the planning board, is a very important position. So I'd like to have all 5 council members here. So I would like to ask my colleagues if they agree to move it to another day.
May I add one more if you're going to make that
Sure, go
motion
ahead.
for your consideration, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor? In the 9 years, this is the first time that I've seen 2.
Those 2, yeah.
And I know a lot of people have approached me at different community events with the support of the council, just because they're 2 in the importance of the planning board and having all 5 of us. I was wondering if the council would possibly entertain directing our city clerk to re-advertise for another 30 more days, because normally we get between 5 and 8 applicants, and I don't know if it's because of summer, vacations, I don't know, but I just think that with only 2 to consider, and the third one is not going to be in the city anymore. We've done this before in past practice for different boards and commissions. We don't get enough folks to really review. I would just ask for consideration to see, it's summer. Maybe there's people out there that would like to apply for the planning board. We only have 2 people.
That's a difficult task. It's a difficult ask.
Okay.
Because we only have 1 appointment with 2 applicants. In the past, when we've said go out for more, it's like 2 or 3 or 4 appointments, and you only have 3 applicants. So that's when we have put it off. In my recollection, that we put it off another 30 days. We've asked the city clerk to put it, to post it again and see what happens. Everybody had a chance. It's advertised, whether you're on vacation or not. I mean, you can get online and submit your application. You can be in Greece and call in. I mean, so I don't know. It's a tough call, Councilmember Frutos.
All I can do is ask, just because I think it's kind of strange that we only have 2 applicants this time.
Well, there was 3 going into the meeting.
Right. Again, if we're going to delay it, I don't see why we can't ask the city clerk to reopen this for more people.
Well,
And if
whatever
not,
my
then
colleagues want to do.
that's just my thought. This is a question.
So, let's talk about postponing the vote, if it's okay with the colleagues, till the vice mayor gets back. Do I have consensus amongst the council to postpone the vote?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I'll just like to comment on that, because
Sure, go
Mr.
ahead.
Hamel is sitting in the
Right.
audience tonight. I don't want this to be portrayed as a reflection on his application, but I understand the concern that you have, Mr. Mayor, because in the event that there were a 2-2 tie, let's say, we'd have no way to break it, and I would not want to create a situation where we have 2 weeks and you have folks lobbying the council to switch a vote or break a tie. In my opinion, it would be appropriate, because the planning board is so critical, that we wait to have a full council to do that, but I just wanted to thank Mr. Hamel for being here, and I did not want him to walk away with the impression that it's a reflection on his credentials. But I just wanted to add that for the record, Mr. Mayor.
Right. So we just, do we take a vote or just consensus to move it till the council, till the
Yeah,
vice
so
mayor gets back?
we're dark on the 16th, so we'll bring it back on the 23rd.
I will not be here at that meeting.
And then Councilmember Frutos will not be here.
So let's move it.
So that pushes us to, we're dark, I believe, on the 30th. I'm looking here.
January 3rd, was it? January 3rd?
August 30th. So the first meeting back will be September 13th.
September 13th, yeah.
Okay. September 13th. All right? Okay. That's good. Now
We'll
the
bring
other-
it back on the 13th.
Yeah. Now, the other question about, your question.
I've said, there's no interest. All I'm doing was asking. I'm happy with our 2 candidates. I'm just going I don't know, just because I've had. Again, my only comment is because I'm happy if we take the vote now, I know who I'm voting for. But at the end of the day, I just am surprised for the planning board.
Yeah.
I've
it's
never
true.
seen I mean, usually it's 5 to 8 candidates, and I've been approached several times at different community events. Hey, tell me, I want to be on the planning board. Hey, get a hold of the city clerk and, find out when. That's the only reason why. But hey, if it's not there, it's okay. I'm not upset.
okay.
I'm just asking to ask. That's it.
All right, we'll move forward then. Okay, so let's see, so we're moving that to September 13th?
Yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is this is a time for brief council comments, including reporting on council committee assignments. Colleagues, Councilmember Frutos.
All right. Going back to Wednesday, July the 20th, I attended the Los Angeles County Civil Brand Commission for institutional inspections. Nothing to report out. Then on Wednesday the 3rd, this is all via Zoom, another Civil Brand Commission for institutional inspections. And then I did attend the one-year memorial for the victims of the collision that occurred at Glen Oaks and Andover. And I really wanted to let the assistant city manager know that one of the parents came up to me and we had a long discussion, but they basically were so positive, the comments of how well Lieutenant Flomer has worked with them, kept them up to speed from the criminal filings to the follow-up to even traffic mitigation suggestions. Please let the chief know down to the chain of command that I did receive the highest compliments of the lieutenant. Then I attended on Friday, August the 5th, the grand opening of a ribbon cutting Lucenet. Then on Saturday, August the 6th, I attended a one-year anniversary ribbon cutting of Random Acts of Breadness. They made some really good sourdough. And a special thank you, real quick, to the mayor. I know the mayor was pushing for Burbank to have its own COVID testing. And I did get COVID and I stayed home for the 10 days. I wanted to make sure not to get anybody sick on the council. But I got to tell you, you did an awesome push because I used the services there at the park. User-friendly. Within 18 hours, there's a text message, positive or negative, but you get kudos for that, for pushing it for the people of Burbank. I took advantage of it. I know a lot of residents. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be quick. July 28th, I represented the city of Burbank at the Valley Economic Alliance Board of Directors meeting. No reportable action. As Councilmember Fruto said, I was with all of you on National Night Out, August 2nd. I had a meeting with the Burbank Boy Scouts to help them earn their citizenship merit badge, and we discussed homelessness on Thursday, August 4th. A series of ribbon cuttings that you talked about, Councilmember Frutos, on August 5th and 6th. Also wanted to convey kudos to all of our nonprofits who had the Burbank Coalition, Nonprofit Coalition's Back to School Fair on Sunday. Very well attended, very positive environment. And then today, I had a busy day. As a follow-up to our last meeting, I had a meeting with the folks at Tesla to get a better understanding of their long-term planning for EV installation in Burbank. Later in the morning, I attended a briefing regarding President Biden's authority for climate action in light of West Virginia versus the EPA, which was the recent court decision that came down regarding that. And then, of course, I spoke with our applicants for the planning board. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Springer?
Great, thank you. I saw my colleagues at several of these events. I did attend the Advisory Council on Disabilities meeting. I Zoomed a SCAG Equitable Homeownership Forum, and the resource cards for the Domestic Violence Task Force are finished. And so we should probably make sure they have some, right?
Sure.
And I went to the one-year memorial for the victims of the collision on Glen Oaks. I packed backpacks for the coordinating council, and that kind of wraps it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a few items to report out. Let's see, I spoke with and met the kids for Take Your Child to Work Day. That was very exciting. I had lunch with Assemblymember Friedman. I, like my colleagues, attended the National Night Out. It was great to see the community out there. I mean, it was a great turnout. It was great to see the city clerk out there. She was doing a great job. I also did a in-person PIO subcommittee meeting with the vice mayor. Let's see what else. LoSen Executive Committee meeting, grand opening, the ribbon cutting of Lucinet. Very nice business down there on right before First Street on Olive. Well, 1 year anniversary of ribbon cutting of the Random Acts of Breadness. I was there when they opened the store a year ago to do the ribbon cutting, and they've been very successful there. They love it. It's almost like a hobby for them. They're only open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Let's see, and attended the Burbank Nonprofit Coalition's Back to School Fair. A lot of kids there. And yesterday, I had a tour of the Providence St. Joseph's Foundation Emergency Department. So that was amazing. The new emergency room over at St. Joe's, amazing. You'll be amazed when you walk through there compared to what I remember from the old days. Anything else? Okay, now is the time for the introduction of additional agenda items. Do members of the council have any items to introduce? Councilmember Frutos?
Thank you. Madam Assistant, because of what I went through with COVID and everything I've researched and learned, is there any way we can update the council attendance policy? Because if you miss 3 meetings in a row, then it's up to the council, the majority of the council to remove you. I like to see that updated, that if you do have COVID, some people get it up to 90 days, that be exempt because we don't know what the next strain of COVID would be. But to update it to include COVID to be an exemption if the council decides when it comes back. Thank you.
Or wouldn't it be better instead of being so specific about an injury or cancer, if you want to say cancer? What I'm thinking
We can
is-
bring back a first step report that would open a more broad discussion, including COVID.
Okay, good point. Excellent. Good job, Councilmember Frutos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in light of our conversation at the last meeting about public comment and tonight's a report from the Charter Review Committee, it occurred to me that we have a resolution. It's number 17-28970, which governed the protocol at council meetings. It is now inconsistent with what we've discussed last time. And so I'd like to have a future agenda item as soon as possible, Madam City Manager, about harmonizing that resolution with our discussion. And I'd personally like to talk about the length of time for public comment, final orals, things of that nature. I just want to have a discussion as a body about this. And that, again, was resolution number 17-28970, which I believe, Mr. City Attorney, is still in effect.
Yes, that's the council's current reso.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. We now adjourn the meeting in memory of former Los Angeles Dodgers sportscaster Vincent Edward Scully. Vin Scully, to Monday, August 22nd, for a special closed session meeting in the council chambers, 275 East Olive Avenue, second floor. The public may view the meeting online or on television and will be able to provide public comment in the following 4 ways. In person for general public comment and public hearings, by calling in directly to the council meeting to speak during the general public comment period and public hearing items only, by leaving an e-comment on the city webpage, and by emailing the city council directly at citycouncil@burbankca.gov. Thank you and have a good evening. We'll see you on the 22nd. We're adjourned.